All right, good evening. This is the February 9 meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Jeff Pritchard is the chair. Tonight's staff is Bruce Lofgren and me, Deb Jones. We have a public hearing on the agenda tonight, as well as public communications. If you want to address the commission under either of those items, you do need to raise your virtual hand on an Apple device. You can find that at the top, on a PC at the bottom of your screen, and if you're on the phone, it is *9.
Okay, so I'll call the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting to order. First item is our roll call. I guess Michael Kane is called in, will not be attending. Is Halzad present?
I do
I
not
don't
see him.
Did he call and
Oh,
say
there we go. He's just coming in now.
he is on now? You're there, Hal?
I'm here.
Okay.
Hal Zock, Z-O-C.
Zock. Wait, you gotta respell your name.
New world, Hal.
We got Barbara is here, Sue's here, Steve is here, and Kevin is here. So everybody, so I guess Steve was appointed last time. Both of you, I assume, were here for our public hearing before.
Yes,
Steve,
I was. Yes, I was.
So I'll point, since Steve was appointed last time we had an absentee, I'll appoint Kevin as to sit in for Michael Kane. And we'll move on to our public hearing, and we open the public hearing for 55 Star Street. And I'd like to go in the order of the applicant, if they have any comments, and then staff if they have any, and then open it up for the public if there's any additional comments they have, and then back to commissioners. So I'll start with the applicant if he has any additional statement to make tonight.
Absolutely. Mr. Chairman, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. For the record, my name is Bill Sweeney. I'm a land use attorney and a partner at the law firm of Tobin Carberry in New London, Connecticut. Joining me tonight again is Greg Fettis, our civil engineer, and Graham Gallagher, who is a principal of 55 Star LLC, which is the applicant. Tonight is a continuation of the public hearing that we started 2 weeks ago. We had a public hearing on a 3-lot subdivision that my client submitted for the property at 55 Star Street. And the commission chose within its rights to continue that public hearing to allow neighbors additional time to review the application. And also asked us as a courtesy to look at 2 options, one of adding sidewalks in front of the property along Star Street, and also the possibility of combining driveways for lots 1 and 2. We took those requests to heart. We spent some time evaluating both. And tonight, we are reporting back that despite the requests, we continue to oppose both the addition of a sidewalk in front of the property and combining any driveways for the lots, as we feel that both are unnecessary. As a courtesy, though, and working with Bruce Lofgren, your town planner, we did develop plans for both for discussion purposes tonight. And we're going to review both of them with you tonight to explain our rationale why we don't think either is appropriate. I'd like to deal with the sidewalk first, and the commission can require sidewalks as a part of any subdivision plan. This is something that is within the commission's discretion because your regulations allow it. We've in turn requested a waiver of that requirement due to the fact that we feel that there are circumstances on Star Street that warrant their waiver. As I said before, we believe that the sidewalks in front of 55 Star Street are unnecessary, and they're also inconsistent with the construction and the nature of Star Street itself. Bruce Lofgren has put up, he put into a presentation several photos that I took of the site prior to all this snow that we've gotten. And prior to the last public hearings. And if I could ask Bruce just to put up that presentation and share it so I could go through those photos. I know that most of you have probably been to the site, but I think the photos are really telling. And if you could just page down through that, that's the proposed subdivision. This is, if you could start right here, this is the northeast corner of the site. And you can see the private access drive that leads back to the Carney and the Labella homes to the left. As I reminded you from the last, if I can remind you from the last hearing, we actually own the halfway mark in that driveway. But what I really want to point out to you is sort of the rural nature of Star Street. And you can see this stone wall that comes right out to the road. Look at the distance between the stone wall and the edge of pavement. Star Street has an extremely constrained right-of-way. There's literally less than 2 feet there between the road and the stone wall. Unlike sort of modern roads that are built in Groton, where you have your pavement and then you have a road right-of-way snow shelf or shelf, that doesn't exist on Star Street. Go to the next slide, Bruce. And you can see there is stone. This is actually the northwestern corner of the property, looking at the existing house. I'm standing at the edge. It's a little bit hard to see, it's cut off. I'm standing at the edge of pavement, but you can see how close that stone wall, how close the telephone poles, how close the mature trees that we're preserving, these trees we're preserving as part of the plan, are to the actual roadway. Just page on one more. Again, this is a picture of the house straight on. You'll notice that that stone wall does not extend across the entire frontage, but literally the property line is just off the pavement. And then if you go to the next slide, I have a couple shots up and down Star Street. And again, this is going toward the water, and you can see how minimal right-of-way there is between the stone walls on the south side of Star Street and the actual edge of pavement. You can also see on this picture how straight Star Street is in this section as well. If you go to the next slide, which is the last slide I need you to go to. This is a look not east toward the river, but west up toward Allen Street. And again, you can see how narrow the road is, how there's limited shelf on the western side of the road. The most important part, again, of this picture is to show you the sight line, which is extremely good, but also that there are no sidewalks whatsoever on Star Street. There are 0 sidewalks pre-existing. And I think this also paints a picture that I think it's important for the commission to consider in their evaluation of whether sidewalks are necessary. In addition to the limited right-of-way, this road does not have the traffic necessary or should require sidewalks. That's not to say that people don't walk on this road. In fact, when I was out here for just a short period, I passed 2 walkers past me. A young woman with a dog, and then an elderly gentleman, both walked down this road. But this is a rural road. There is little car traffic on it, and people walk easily within the gutters of the road. There's really no need for formal sidewalks where you would need in much busier communities where there's higher traffic counts. And again, I would point out the fact that there are no sidewalks whatsoever existing on Star Street right now. Bruce, I'm all set with that. If Greg, if you could share the proposed sidewalk plan that we prepared at the request of the town staff.
Why isn't it showing up? Hold on. There we go.
So again, I want to specify that we're not in support of the sidewalks, and we're continuing to request a waiver of them. But I wanted to show you what would be required if we actually did put sidewalks in. And the reality is that we've got the telephone poles on the street. We have the edge of pavement, which needs a setback. You can't have the sidewalk right up to the edge of pavement. And there are basic standards for sidewalks that we have to meet. And if the commission at the end of the day wants sidewalks, we can provide you a sidewalk in front of the frontage of the property. We're showing the 4-foot bituminous concrete sidewalk stretching across that frontage. But there will be impacts related to that project in terms of existing features. Natural features that your regulations also ask you to try to preserve. We will have to remove the stone wall that runs along the northwestern edge of the property. We will need to remove some of the stone wall at the northeast corner. I've shown you pictures of both of those areas. We'll also lose 2 of the existing trees along the northwest corner of the property, simply because they're either going to be displaced by the sidewalk or their trunks will be right up against it. Now we certainly can put in a new proposed street tree to meet your regulations. We can even relocate that stone wall to the back side of the sidewalk. That's possible. And if that's what you want us to do at the end of the day, that's your choice, not ours. But I think your regulations want us to try to keep things in their natural state. When we met with your planning staff originally, that was something that was asked of us, to try to maintain those mature trees and the existing stone wall. And I think there is a rub here. And I would also point out, if you look carefully, this sidewalk is built significantly on our property. There is simply not enough right-of-way in Star Street to accommodate a sidewalk across the entire frontage. So we would have to provide an easement in favor of the town for the sidewalk. Again, something we're willing to do if you want the sidewalk. But I just wanted to show you that and point that out because it points to the fact of how constrained it is. I think also, I think I would suggest that the commission look at the bigger picture. Can we replant new street trees? Can we relocate a stone wall? Can we build a new sidewalk? Yes. But as I made the point at the last meeting, to what end? If you were to ever connect this sidewalk to any other property on Star Street, you're going to need the same type of easements that we would be giving you as part of the subdivision. And so for every other property owner on the south side of Star Street, you would need these same easements, and you would need to go into their properties to build the sidewalk. I would submit to you that unless someone else does something similar to what we're doing, tearing down an existing house and doing a subdivision, and there's only a couple lots that have the acreage to really do that effectively, this will be a sidewalk to nowhere. It will not make any connections to the east or the west. And to us, that simply doesn't make any sense to put it in at this time. I'd like to shift now to the driveway issue. And if you could bring up that plan, Greg. Thanks, Greg. So I think it was Commissioner Zod who asked us to explore the possibility of combining the driveway for Lot 1 and Lot 2. And again, we don't support that, that modification to our subdivision design. But again, in a spirit of good faith and for discussion purposes, we prepared this plan at the request of your planner. It can physically be done, and you can see that we can access both houses over a common driveway. But I would submit to you that the commission only has the limited ability to actually require this of us. I would point you to section 4.25B of your subdivision regulations. The commission is limited by your own regulations in when you can force an applicant to combine access drives. And you can only do that where lots cannot be served by a frontage road. And then you can only do that for the purpose of limiting, quote, possible traffic hazards. All 3 of our lots can easily be serviced from Star Street. We showed that on our original plan. And there is no substantive evidence whatsoever that's been submitted in the plan into the record of tonight's hearing or the last hearing to suggest that there's any traffic hazard created by this project, this development, or the orientation of the driveways. Substantial evidence is actual testimony. It's evidence from an expert. Your town engineer has reviewed these plans. He's made no concern whatsoever has been voiced about the orientation of the driveways. Bottom line is you cannot require them as a matter of law to be combined without evidence that combining them alleviates a traffic hazard. Now, at the last hearing, we heard about so-called neighborhood character. We heard concerns about aesthetics. We heard concerns about personal desires, but that doesn't give the commission the authority to combine a driveway. From our perspective, we think it's really important to have separate driveways as a marketing aspect of this project. They say that fences make good neighbors. Well, also individual driveways make good neighbors. Shared driveways work when you have neighbors that get along, but they can really be a source of problematic situations and conflicts when neighbors don't get along. And so we ideally would like to have a separate driveway for each lot. And again, there's no evidence that there's any safety hazard created. Last night, I also wanted to just touch on briefly, and you can actually put that down. You can close that down, Greg. Thanks. I was trying to get my camera up. I don't know if you guys can see me or not, but I don't seem to have that ability to do that. So apologize if I'm just talking.
Oh, you disappeared, Bill.
Thank you.
I promoted you. Bill, now you can turn your camera.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Let me just start my video. I appreciate that. Also, I wanted to cover just two other items with you. And again, we had a long public hearing 2 weeks ago, and I don't want to belabor points. But last night at about 6:30, one of the neighbors or a representative of one of the neighbors, John Carney, his son, Stephen, submitted a letter to you, which has been entered into the record. I got a copy of that letter this morning. I tried to respond in writing, and Bruce, properly noted that you have a rule that I can't submit anything within 24 hours of a hearing. So he asked me, rather than to submit the letter, just share with you my responses to it. So I'd like to do that at this time. Mr. Carney's letter, again, on behalf of his father, John, who lives behind this project, raised a series of questions regarding our project, and I just wanted to take a moment to answer them. Mr. Carney indicated that his father is insistent that the frontage of 55 Star Street property is less than 167 feet. Respectfully, he's incorrect in that assumption. We've submitted an A2 survey from Mr. Fettis's firm that shows the existing frontage to be 184.5 feet. He also asked the question about how necessary street frontage is calculated for a rear lot. And you can find that in section 4.2-2.J2 of the zoning regulations, which requires a 25-foot wide frontage for a rear lot. His second question was that his father insists that 55 Star Street has no rights to the driveway that runs along the eastern property line. He indicated that the LLC appears to be using his father's driveway to calculate the frontage on Star Street, the width of the proposed lots, and the overall square footage of 55 Star Street, and the square footage of at least 2 of the proposed lots. And again, respectfully, he's incorrect in his assumption. 55 Star Street LLC is the fee simple owner. That is, they own the actual real estate under the western half of the driveway. Now, that ownership is subject to Mr. Carney's father's right to pass and repass over that driveway. But we are the title owner to that, and we've provided evidence of that, substantial evidence, in the form of a submitted A2 survey signed by Mr. Fettis's firm. I'd also remind you that both state law and your own regulations restrict you from adjudicating any issues of title. Title issues are reserved solely for our courts, and they are not to be considered or adjudicated by planning and zoning commissions. Mr. Carney goes on, if the driveway is not used in calculations, is the number of potentially permissible lots diminished? And our response is that question is irrelevant, as the eastern driveway is not used to access any of the proposed lots and therefore can be used for lot area calculations. His third question is, does a limited property interest in the driveway, such as for occasional but never primary access to and egress from the rear portions of 55 Star Street. He gives a citation, provides enough of an interest to allow to be considered for calculations of the square footage necessary for the subdivision. And as I indicated before, the applicant's interest in the western half of the driveway, as shown on the survey, is not limited. It's a fee simple interest, subject to the easement in favor of Mr. Carney's father and others. Now, we do have a restriction in the actual agreement between all the property owners in the area that we can't use that driveway as a primary access point for any residents. But that's no different than, for example, having an electric distribution easement on your property that restricts your ability to plant trees underneath it. You're still the property owner. You still can seek a subdivision of land, but you're restricted in how you can use that land. And so it really is no different than that. The fourth question that Mr. Carney proposes is, if the driveway only provides a property interest in the rear of 55 Star Street, can it be considered only to calculate the square footage and required street frontage of the subdivided rear lot? Again, we own the actual property under the western half of the driveway in fee simple. That is what we need to be able to submit a subdivision application. Our A2 survey provides evidence of that. He asked the question, how is it decided where the rear of a property begins and the front ends? I don't understand that question, and I don't have an answer, but I can tell you that we have an A2 survey out on record, which is substantive evidence of the ownership and property lines regarding this matter. Finally, two more, I'm sorry. There's a question of which regulations are the board being asked to rely upon to subdivide the driveway over the objection of property owners with a superior interest. This question assumes a false set of facts. The adjacent property owners, Ms. Labella and Mr. Carney, do not have a superior interest, and their objection has no legal standing to our ability to file a subdivision application. The seventh question deals with the Mystic Historic District. I won't go through all of it, but just basically questioning whether the line is properly drawn and whether any portion of the property is within the historic district. The historic district map, which is of record, defines the boundary between the parcels as the middle of the driveway. That's what it shows. That's what's on the internet. And it's clear that the subject property is outside of the district. We covered this at the last meeting. Regardless, though, even if it was a portion of it was in the district, has no impact whatsoever on the subdivision application. It could have an impact on us building a certain structure later on. But again, there's no question, we're not proposing, and nor could we build a structure in any portion that's involving the driveway. There's also a concern at the end of his letter regarding the protection of wetlands. He raises a concern that there are wetlands across the street in Star Street on private property across the street, and he submits a GIS map, which he called out some distances, suggesting that a portion of some poorly drained soils may be within 91 feet of the site. I have several comments to that. First, there is no requirement for us to submit a subdivision plan to the Wetlands Commission unless, and this is the important part, the land we are subdividing contains inland wetlands. This is codified in state statute as well as your regulations. I would point you to section 6.2 of your regulations that says if an application to the Town of Groton Planning and Zoning Commission for subdivision or re-subdivision of land involves land containing a wetland or watercourse, the application, in accordance with section, it gives a bunch of sites of the Connecticut General Statutes, must submit an application for a permit to the agency, the wetland agency, in accordance with this section, no later than the day the application is filed with such planning commission. There's a similar provision in the wetland regulations for the Town of Groton as well. And so we have no obligation to go to wetlands for off-site wetlands whatsoever regarding this subdivision. I want to also point out, even if that wasn't true, the land across the street is privately owned. We don't own it. We have no ability or legal obligation to go on that land and flag wetlands. We can't do that. That's trespass. Third, and I think this is important, and it might be something just to keep in mind whenever anybody comes in with a GIS map. The map that he submitted is actually derived from the USGS soil survey, which has a locational accuracy of plus or minus hundreds of feet. That soil survey, and it's been around since the 1970s, was actually digitized and brought into your GIS system. And that both the USGS soil data and your GIS system is not intended for the actual delineation of soil units. Distance and information derived from the USGS map and your GIS are for graphical purposes only, and they don't substitute for survey work. They're just not reliable. There's actually on this town's website, on your GIS website, a frequently asked questions page. And I just want to point out that there's a question, is this data survey accurate? And the answer is very clear. No, we make every effort to be as accurate as possible, but this data should be in no way considered survey accurate. Further in that FAQ, it also says property information has been derived from recorded deeds, plats, public records, and other data. The intent of this information is to provide the user with a graphical representation of real property, planimetric, topographic, and other digital information for the town of Groton. Here's the important part. The user should not rely on the data provided herein for any reason. The town's wetland map as well, its official wetland map has a similar proviso that says the precise location of regulated areas shall be determined by the actual character of the land, the distribution of wetland soil types, and the location of water courses. So I just want to conclude tonight with just a few items regarding your legal charge and how to review a subdivision that comes before you. We 100% understand and recognize that there are some neighbors who oppose this plan. They don't want 3 additional lots in the neighborhood. Many of them would probably be happy to have the property stay as is, or maybe be free divided into 2 lots. And that's okay. That's their legal right. And it's their legal right to come here tonight and express their opposition. But this P&Z Commission is a creature of statute. You are legally bound by the state statutes and the regulations, both zoning and subdivision, that you've adopted. A subdivision is not a discretionary approval. If we meet your zoning and your subdivision regulations, you must approve our application. Now, you personally may dislike the plan, you may prefer a different layout or a different number of lots, but you can't act outside of the requirements of state law or your own regulations. Connecticut has well-established case law on this issue. For example, you cannot deny a subdivision plan on the basis of, quote, impact to neighborhood character, as long as we meet your subdivision and zoning requirements. There's a 1986 Superior Court decision called Plamadon versus P&Z Commission of Bridgeport that stands for this proposition. Further, you cannot deny us on the grounds that somehow Star Street is too narrow, it's inadequate. This is based on a 1987 Supreme Court case, Reed versus P&Z of the town of Chester. You cannot deny us based on private easements or restrictions, and you can't adjudicate people's rights in these private easements. There's 2 1987 appellate court cases, Williams versus P&Z of Norfolk and Gagnon versus Municipal P&Z of Ansonia, that stand for that proposition. And finally, you cannot reduce the number of lots or change our layout merely because neighbors desire less lots or a different layout. The Supreme Court in Cristofaro versus the town of Burlington in 1991 held that as well. Bottom line is, if we conform with your zoning regulations and we conform with your subdivision regulations, you must approve our plan. In conclusion, the plan you submitted tonight has been reviewed by all your city departments and agencies. It's been reviewed by your own planning staff, and they've all concluded that we meet or exceed the requirements of your subdivision and zoning regulations. That doesn't mean we're not empathetic to our neighbors who don't want change. Nobody wants change, particularly in the neighborhood you live in. But your legal responsibility is clear in this case. We would ask you to close the public hearing tonight at the end of the testimony and issue an approval to the subdivision plan, which my client is entitled. Thank you for your attention tonight, and we reserve the right of rebuttal. Thank you.
All right. Does staff have anything to add?
This is Bruce Lofgren from the Office of Planning and Development Services, just for the record. I don't have too much to add. I mean, Attorney Sweeney covered everything pretty well. We covered a lot during the public hearing at the last meeting. I'll just add a couple things that I may have already stated at the previous meeting, and just a couple additional pieces of information. The property is located in an RS12 zoning district. All these proposed lots do meet the zoning requirements of that. They're all in excess of 12,000 square feet. They meet the frontage requirements, and we are basing that off the A2 survey that was submitted with the application that was prepared by a professional land surveyor, and what we consider that to be accurate. For the sidewalks, so originally, staff's position wasn't too adamant on the need for sidewalks, but it is within the commission's ability to require them. Sidewalks are always useful, but in this particular neighborhood, there is low traffic. There aren't any sidewalks on Star Street, but there are some on Pearl Street, there are some on Clift, and there are some on High Street. Most of the sidewalks in the neighborhood are bituminous asphalt. We did note that. So we would be acceptable, or I would support that bituminous could be a substitute for the concrete requirement. If the commission did require sidewalks as part of this. Then I just wanted to point out that we do have a bicycle, pedestrian, and trails master plan. We use this for identifying, where sidewalks are in the town, where we proposed areas that sidewalks should be expanded, and Star Street is not on the list of an area that we've identified as an expansion for sidewalks. So that goes along with the basis of why it wasn't in the original recommendation to prepare sidewalks for this plan. Also, something to consider is that the existing stone wall, the existing mature trees there, I think do a lot for the streetscape of the project. And I think that adding a sidewalk in there would kind of eliminate some of the redeeming qualities of this subdivision. So preserving the stone wall and mature trees seemed like an important aspect of the subdivision that I recommended they be retained. And with that, I can certainly answer questions after, but I don't want to go on too long and repeat myself.
Okay, thank you, Bruce. So we'll move on to if there's anyone in the public that would like to address us tonight. Do we have anybody, Deb, that's online?
We do. I'm just going to take them from the top. Let's see, Ken Slater.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Can I also be given an invitation to join the party on video, or should I have to stay on audio?
Up to the commission.
Well, I don't have a problem. I don't know what you want the video for, but.
Do you want to promote him?
This is the same reason that Attorney Sweeney did. It's just a.
There we go. All right, there we go. You've been promoted to panelist.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, the only reason was just for the same reason Attorney Sweeney suggested. It's more of a collaborative discussion when you can see me and I can see you. I'm Attorney Ken Slater. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Halloran and Sage. I'm a partner in the land use and environmental group there, as well as the municipal practice group. I represent Olga Labella, who you've already heard from and is one of the persons who's adamantly opposed to the 3-lot subdivision. A couple of points I want to make that actually I wasn't initially going to comment on, but based on Attorney Sweeney's comments, one thing I would note, based on Mr. Carney's letter, it sounds as though that based on the information of the wetlands map, and wetlands mapping, as Attorney Sweeney suggested, they are often not field located. They're supposed to be once someone is going to do the development, but there's other mechanisms in which a town creates its wetlands map, and that's usually reflected on the GIS. And based on that, if it's within 100 feet, my understanding it's a regulated activity under the Groton wetland regulations. And if in fact that's the case, then the fact that the wetlands might be located on another land, I didn't understand Attorney Sweeney's position on that. It would be if you have, pristine wetlands, 10 feet from your property, and the fact that it's located on the other property doesn't change the fact that if you were going to do an activity that is or may, because that's where the regulated activity definitions of the wetland regulations come into being, is if you're within a certain distance of certain wetlands and watercourses. I believe it's 100 from any watercourse or wetlands, and I think it's a different distances for some other watercourses in town. So that's something that staff might want to consult with the town attorney on, as to whether or not an application was required, because the general statutes, they say land having regulated wetlands. I'm not quoting it exactly, but I think that's been interpreted that if there's an activity that requires a wetland application, that application needs to be filed in advance of or simultaneously with the subdivision application. And the commission is not supposed to render a decision on the subdivision application until the Wetlands Commission has issued a report. Now, they could conclude that it's not a regulated activity, but based on if the mapping shows that it's within 100 feet, the fact that the wetland might be located off site should be of no consequence. So that's something I think that I would suggest the commission and staff take a look at. The 2 points I was planning to raise, you've already heard, the neighbors, I think, justifiably think that this is a 10 pounds of potatoes in a 5-pound sack, that a two lot subdivision would be a perfectly reasonable one, whether it be by way of a free cut because it doesn't need a subdivision. I hadn't done the title work to know whether breaking it into 2 lots requires subdivision or whether it's a free lot. But there's no question that that's their perspective, and I think it would be yours as well if you live next door. The 2 lots that have real front frontage on Star Street would be well designed, and the third one's just too much. To that point, one thing that there is certain discretionary elements of doing a subdivision, as Attorney Sweeney mentioned. If you comply entirely with the subdivision regulations, you folks are obligated to approve the subdivision. There's one thing, though, that your subdivision regulations provide for, which is open space, and that's the default. Now, I understand this is a small lot. This is not a situation where you're looking at a giant subdivision where there's an opportunity for, recreational land on a pristine river or something of that nature. But you're not obligated to accept a deed or fee in lieu of open space. And if you think that an area on this site would be better served to have some area that the owners of properties within this, in this proposed subdivision would be better served with a recreational area that they could both use, that is within your discretion. You absolutely have that authority. So if you rejected the request, and then they would be required to redesign it in a way that would show open space. So that is something that is within your prerogative. The other thing that I wanted to raise is I'm in 100% agreement with Attorney Sweeney that your commission, and I'm advised that we represent a lot of towns and a lot of commissions, and the issues of private ownership and somebody coming in and saying, wait a minute, I have an easement there, or they don't own it, this, that. You can't do that. You're not charged with trying to know who owns the land. You are, in some instances, if you know of an issue. In this particular case, I've been engaged, and I'm advising the commission to this fact. I've been engaged to commence a civil action for adverse possession of the land that would run by my client against the owners of the applicants to the stone wall, and that we assert ownership, or my client asserts ownership to the stone wall. You can't make a determination of whether we do or don't. That's a court's decision of whether or not we've exercised my client, who's owned for well over the 15-year requirement to demonstrate adverse possession. And I'm sure you folks know what it is, but if a person uses openly and notoriously an area, the area, I'm not talking about the driveway, because the driveway, they have an easement. So that's something that they have a right to do. They have permission to do. They can't claim adversely something that they own. But the areas on each side of the travelway, they've exercised exclusive dominion over the area, and I will be filing a suit to make that claim. Now, the reason why I raise that with you is that I suggest that you consider, if you were to issue an approval based on the plan as it's designed, that you include a condition that, and you have time, if you want to wait to be able to reference the citation to the Superior Court action in which we're asserting title to a portion of this land. If you don't mention it or don't include a condition, then you run the risk that persons are going to buy one of these lots. And if we prevail in the suit that will be filed within the next 2 weeks, then the lot that you would approve will be non-compliant with zoning. So a condition that says, that references that in the event that my client might not be successful, and in which case the configuration as it's shown to you right now would be the palette that you're working with to show whether it does barely meet, from my review, barely meets your minimum size and requirements for the rear lot. But if that land included to the center line of the driveway were not included, the plan would have to be reconfigured to make it compliant. So to include a condition, so people are aware of that, if they're going to buy the lot, that the owner would have to refile to revise the plan. It wouldn't be a re-subdivision because they wouldn't be creating a fourth lot, but it would be a modification from the approval if you did issue one. If you issued it, if you decided, if, for example, you didn't agree with my suggestion that open space should be required, and that you reject the concept of a fee in lieu of open space, and went ahead and approved this configuration with the fee in lieu, then people should be put on notice that there is a challenge to the ownership there that would require the plan to come back before you to be reconfigured in order for that to be a legal lot. That doesn't put you in a position to take any position with respect to that adverse possession claim, which you shouldn't. But knowing that it's coming, and again, you have the time, both the ordinary statute time frame as well as the additional 90 days the executive order gives you, if you want to either keep the public hearing open and make sure that I'm true to my word and that suit will be filed and that you see that it's there, then, or you simply, it'll be a matter of public record. If you close the public hearing, the staff would be able to confirm the reference to the name and the docket number of the case, so that people are not put in a position where they end up buying a lot that they think is zoning compliant, only to find that that the portion of the land that is being shown as owned by the applicant is in fact owned by my client through the doctrine of adverse possession. So I think it would be a benefit to a potential buyer of the property to be aware of that. And you can do that by way of a condition. Thanks for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions about the topics I've just brought up.
All right, Deb, we have other people that wish to address this.
We do. Madeline Carney.
Yes, this is Olga Labella. If I may, I'd like to address the members of the board. I wrote a letter that I'd like to read to you. A little heartfelt, and obviously.
Could you say your address, please? And your
I'm 43 Star Street. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I'd like to read a letter that I wrote to address the board this evening. Obviously, this is heartfelt. This is a very significant moment in my life that I find to be extremely disappointing and extremely unnerving. I'm going to read the letter to members of the board. As you know, I do continue to object to the above noted application for the subdivision. In a recent zoning hearing held via Zoom on Tuesday, January 26th, the attorney for the LLC indicated the people behind the project visited Mystic, loved it so much that they decided to create a subdivision on property that is just outside my kitchen window. Although the regulations posted on the Town of Groton website clearly indicated that subdivisions should not destroy the character of a neighborhood, diminish property values, invade privacy, or destroy the natural topography of land. The attorney for the project told the board that these are not valid considerations and that state law mandates that this project be approved. I want to say I am disappointed and very concerned that no one on the board corrected that statement. If the board is not committed to supporting its statements, then a revision to the regulations should be made to reflect what is accurate and not misleading to property owners who rely on this information when making investments in their home. The placement, the placement of 2 private driveways on an already congested area will negatively affect pedestrian safety as well as driving on Star Street. The area extending from the bottom of Cliff Lane to the stop sign on the corner of Star and Grove Street currently houses 3 private driveways and 1 right-of-way driveway. The proposed addition of 2 more driveways in succession on the same side of the road can only challenge pedestrian safety, but also affects driving on this two-way street. One can assume that each dwelling associated with each driveway will house more than 1 vehicle. The addition of vehicles in and out of these driveways and the added activities associated with each dwelling will increase the likelihood of accidents occurring on this already narrow street. A large evergreen tree at the foot of the stone wall at the bottom of my driveway obstructs my view as I exit my property. The proposed addition of a tree line along the stone wall will further obstruct views of traffic coming down Star Street. That's a perfect case of an accident waiting to happen. The ground encompassing this subdivision holds a great deal of ledge and is easily seen by the naked eye. The extent of how much may be buried under the ground is currently unknown, and I assume blasting will be needed to penetrate its rocky base and allow for development. With my home being in such close proximity, are safety measures being implemented to protect my home and its foundation from damage? The attorney for the project indicated that he has filed application for a variance with the zoning board. His comments suggested that this area does not need sidewalks and it is not populated with walkers. This unfounded presumption coming from someone who lives elsewhere and knows nothing of the daily life of this community is blatantly wrong. As neighbors can attest, this area is heavily used by pedestrians daily in order to exercise, bicycle ride, walk, or simply to enjoy their day in this cherished area while overlooking the historic Mystic Seaport. It is of my opinion that sidewalks should be provided to help ensure public safety, especially if one is anticipating an increase of activity within the area. With certainty, the safety of pedestrians should be of paramount concern to city officials. I am in hopes this request for variance be denied. As documented on the subdivision plan, the minimum requirement for a rear yard is 25 feet. For the side yard, 12 feet, and 12,000 square feet for a minimum lot size. On the proposed plans, house number 2 met the rear yard requirement by 1.4 feet. Proposed house number 3 met the side yard requirement at exactly 12 feet and fulfilled the minimum lot size requirement by 12,024 square feet. It is obvious that every attempt at manipulating the 55 Star Street property has been made in order to stuff 3 houses onto a 0.96 acre parcel of land. Density calculations done for the immediate 18.1 area involving 36 dwelling units was recently completed by Bruce Lofgren. The results showed there was 1 dwelling per 21,900 square feet, or 1 dwelling unit per 1/2 acre. The proposed subdivision may be in line with zoning requirements. However, it is totally out of line when compared to our neighbors' lot sizes. My questions to the members of the board: how is this subdivision actually adding value to our community? What efforts are being made by the LLC to preserve the character of our community? Does squeezing 3 lots onto 1 lot serve that purpose? Are zoning codes the rule of law. Is that all that dictates? It is true that the regulations posted on the town of Groton's website that subdivisions should not destroy the character of a neighborhood, diminish property values, invade privacy, or destroy the natural topography of land, just sheer fluff. And as stated by the project's attorney, not valid reasons by state law. Are my basic human rights to privacy and security not important? It is clearly obvious that this LLC holds no vested interests in our Mystic community. Its only goal is to use its character, heritage, and beauty to monetarily benefit from it. The approval of the subdivision, as shown, does nothing to preserve the fabric of our community. It is of my opinion that it only degrades its character, physical beauty, and charm. To those of you who hold the power in this town, have the ability to uphold the integrity of this neighborhood, town, and community. Important decisions poorly made and made that benefit only a certain few and are not for the common good of a community have negative and irrevocable consequences. None of us will be here forever, but it is our responsibility as citizens and responsible human beings to leave to the next generation a part of our past that has not been destroyed by corporate greed. I again respectfully ask that you deny this application. Thank you for letting me read this.
All right, thank you for your input. Deb, we have others.
Yes.
In regard to the one that's Madeline Carney, there's
Yes.
seven people that graduated gathered at Star Street to listen to the hearing. I'd like to speak. I'm Stephen Carney of 18 Borough Street, and I'm not sure who else here was still interested about speaking about the project. May I?
Go ahead.
So I did put my dad's concerns in writing, and I shared my concerns as well. They're mine as a Groton resident, and his as an adjacent property owner. And I won't belabor every point, but my first question about how the street fee is calculated for a rear lot is based at least in fact that people, many of whom I'm sitting with, have been here for decades, really have seen that lot being much smaller than the LLC asserts that it is. And when I asked my second question, well, if you take the driveway out of this, are you able to get 3 lots in there? And I noticed that Mr. Sweeney refused to answer that question, which I think answers the question. If you don't count the driveway, then 3 lots just simply can't go there. And I would assert that this is different than other projects I've seen in the area, and that Mr. Sweeney, on behalf of the LLC, seems dependent upon land that he does not own outright. And it's hard to see other projects with such a minimal property interest using it as frontage to subdivide. Mr. Sweeney can't really say anything that the property owners of 55 Star Street can do with that land. They can't plant on it. They can't use it with any kind of regularity. They can't access the side or front of the property. They don't maintain it. They don't put gravel on it. They've not done any plantings on it. There is nothing that a person can do on that land. So to say he owns it in fee simple, or the corporation owns it in fee simple, to what end? And it seems that if the only thing that they can do with that land is use it to make the lot look bigger on paper, so that in actuality people are looking at 3 houses squeezed onto what historically has been 1 lot, I would say that's an inappropriate use of the easement or the property and beyond what they're allowed to use it for. And then the question that I asked in number 3, are there other properties in town that such a limited interest has been used to utilize that property for the calculations necessary for a subdivision? It seems that the property, the right of way or the driveways in the land records only gives access to the rear of the property. And as such, if it's only the rear of the property, how can the other parts of the property use it in any sort of way? How does the western side of the property use it in any sort of way? And in what ways would the lot in the front be able to use it? Are there regulations that the board is being asked to rely upon that allow a driveway to be subdivided over the objection of people with property interests? And there I'm just looking to point to certain regulations. I did go to law school, but it was a long time ago. And the one property class I got, I think I got a C+. These are in the form of questions, but there are certain questions that don't seem like answers from Mr. Sweeney. It's like, where is this regulation that says you can divide land where there's such a minimal property interest? The historic district question, as I started to look at my dad's deed, I could see that the owners, the Gannons, many of whom are sitting with me now today, on the property record say, we don't know where the line is. That was in the 80s. Well, the Historic District Commission was made in the 70s. And to the extent that the line was moved at that time, I would suggest that it was moved into the historic district. And what would be there is stone walls that we're talking about. And I think these are historic structures that the Historic District Commission would typically have say in. And I think that's at least an interesting question. And I wonder if there is a requirement to consult them. And it really is in the form of a question, not a statement of fact. I don't know what happens in such a situation. In regard to the wetlands, I was told by a builder, hey, that's a difficult area to deal with. There are questions there. I don't understand my question fully, but what I do think is important is that it be fully vetted, talked about, the Wetlands Commission consulted, and we make sure that something's not done here that can't be undone. And that seems to be a very, very reasonable request. And then in regard to the sidewalks, that is a personal interest of mine. I moved to Mystic because I was looking for a place where I could raise a family, where I could put them on sidewalks and they could go to church, go to the library, and a multitude of other things. It's what makes Mystic different. And I would say that over the time that I've lived here in Mystic, I've watched Star Street change. I have seen the road narrow. And when Mr. Sweeney talks about the road being so narrow, and he goes on to some length about that, well, I remember when Star Street was wider. And this was a deliberate tact, I think, that the town took to keep it in a rural sort of way. And Mr. Sweeney is looking to change that. But if I look at the properties that have been developed since I've been here, the one at the bottom of the driveway, that's been added since then. If there was a sidewalk that was put there at that time, it would connect with this new project. There was a house across the street that Reardon had bought near the top, near High Street. Again, that's since we've been here. And if each time when a project was done, sidewalks were put in place over the course of time, we would have a well-sidewalked field. I can't help but look across the street at that beautiful meadow and wonder what some LLC from Greenwich has got their eyes on in regard to that. And if we can't do anything, if Mr. Sweeney says, no, statutes say that people can come here and do whatever they want, well, we at least ought to preserve the safety of the people who live here and continue to want to recreate here. And so those were my main points that I wanted to raise. I do ask you to look at what I've put in writing. And I would say to you that although Mr. Sweeney, Mr. Slater can cite to the statutes, I would say you've got these regulations. They have to mean something. And if they don't mean something, then get rid of them. Because it's not fair for property owners to buy property and think that these regulations actually mean something. And so I would say they should either be withdrawn or utilized. And I would suggest that you use them. Thanks. I'm not sure if anybody here else wants to speak.
Hello, may I speak? John Rohrbach is my name. I own the property that's been referred to as the meadow across the street. I think it's listed as 0 Star Street.
What's your address, please?
Right behind it.
What's your address for the record?
30 Star Lane.
Mm-hmm. Okay, go ahead.
And I Mr. Sweeney has quite a silver tongue. You know, I think he did a very good job, but I don't agree with everything. Particularly, the only one I'm really qualified to argue with is his characterization of Star Street as being lightly traveled. He may have visited during COVID, but at other times it's very heavily traveled and it's dangerous. It's a route from north along River Road and then up to High Street from the north to the south. And people drive way too fast on it. And there are dozens and dozens of pedestrians on the road. So 3 more houses is going to make it that much worse. Otherwise, I echo the views of my neighbors, and I think 3 houses is too many. Thank you.
All right. Can we get back to our list, Deb?
Certainly. Is there anyone else under Madeline Carney who wishes to speak before I move on?
Yes, I think there's one more person.
Hi, this is Lynn Gannon. I was living at 55 Star Street for the last 4 years, caring for my parents. And if there's one thing they would have never wanted, it was
Can
this.
we have your address for the record? Can we have your address, please?
Certainly. It's currently 24 Fairway Drive in Ledyard.
Okay.
Before I signed the sales and purchase agreement with the buyer, I had my sister's realtor, Amy Swan, talk to Rennie Gallagher, and I would not sign that if they were going to build more than 2 houses on it. I didn't get it in writing, and that was my mistake. But she promised me that they were just thinking about it, didn't know what they would do, but I said I would not sign it. And I was hoodwinked because I was told that that wasn't going to happen. That was totally a lie. And now they're talking 3 houses. And my parents, who reside now in St. Patrick's Cemetery, they would be rolling over in their graves, both of them, because this is nothing they would have ever wanted. They just loved the lot. And I was hoping that we were selling it to someone who was going to move in, renovate the house, enlarge it, maybe do a 2-car garage. And I think I could come to the idea that maybe they want to subdivide the lot and maybe put 2 houses on there, but 3 houses is just nauseating. And if I could have some other neighbor here who helped build that house, he's now in his late 80s. He's not here tonight, but he knows all about that property because he helped build the house. And I'm just very saddened by this because I realize that we have sold this property to the wrong people. And I'm very sad about it. They bought 1 lot with 1 house. They paid $419,000 and they are turning it into 3 properties and making a killing on this. And it has nothing to do with Mystic and the beauty of this historic district. It just has to do with greed and money. And I'm saddened by the whole thing. I just had to get my 2 cents worth in.
All right, thank you for your input.
I think that's, I'm sorry.
Sheila Gannon, 55 Cliff Lane. Can people hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to say, I spoke a couple of weeks ago, but I'm just reaffirming tonight that I'm totally disgusted by this proposal, and it is nothing that my parents would have ever wanted. It is not appropriate for the neighborhood. I think people are out to, make a killing monetarily and not looking at the character of the neighborhood and thinking about Mystic, the beauty of Mystic. And I just think it is just an absolutely repulsive proposal, and I'm totally against it.
Good.
I believe that that's everybody that wanted to speak who's gathered at 51 Star Street tonight.
Thank you. Let's see, Leah Hartman.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Ms. Jones, thank you so much for recognizing me. My name is Leah Hartman. I own the property at 105 River Road, which is the second house north of the corner of Star, River Road, Grove, and Pearl. I can see directly from my the back side, the west side of my house, over to the property at 55 Star. My concerns are not in telling the commissioners what they can and cannot do. I think the attorneys have done a very fine job of reminding you of your duties. And I, as a taxpayer, would underscore that you actually do have that obligation of being concerned about the traffic hazard. So thank you to Mr. Sweeney for mentioning about traffic hazards from section 4.52B, I believe you mentioned. I am concerned about the number of driveways accessing Star. So it is interesting to me, Mr. Sweeney, that you say that we are a rural community, and yet you are proposing for your client to take a 1 acre property and subdivide it into 12,000 square feet lots, right? 3 lots, less than an acre. And while permittable, that doesn't fit in my recognition, or I believe the town's recognition of rural property. I do ask of the commissioners, who has the burden of proof as to the safety hazard or the safety of adding 3 driveways to entrance onto Star? I agree with the people who have spoken previously that it is a very busy street. Mr. Sweeney, do you live in Mystic? Not answering.
Well,
Does your
you
client
can only
live in
be
I'm not
you should
permitted
be
to.
making
right?
statements.
Because you're proposing, we're relying on the statement of Mr. Sweeney on behalf of his client that is a rural street, that in his time in Mystic, he saw 2 people walking, one with a dog. I walk that street twice a day. I typically walk that street with 5 other people and with dogs. There is on-street parking permitted on Star Street. The addition of 2 more driveways in addition to the existing driveway, therefore 3 driveways between the corner of Cliff Lane and just to the commingled driveway that's under consideration of who owns what, is just untenable. It's unsafe. And should any of you come to Mystic on an Mystic event day when we have on-street parking on Star Street, you cannot see to exit the driveway. It is not safe presently, and the addition, in my opinion, and again, I asked you, where's the burden of proof? If we need to do it as homeowners in the community to show you what the traffic flow is, the entrance from River Road, as was mentioned before, to get up to High Street to then get to I-95, or the cutoff from High Street down to River Road to get down to Pearl to town, is a very busy street. People do drive too quickly. It would be delightful to have another stop sign there, but there isn't. So it is not safe to add 2 more driveways, in my opinion. I was very disappointed. I was not able to join the first hearing, and I found that the having renovated several homes, I found that the disclosure of not showing us what the plot lines were for the proposed 3 lots in the mailing to homeowners was appalling. We have people here who are part-time Mystic and part-time elsewhere, and to get that information so lacking in detail while available at City Hall was just really quite disappointing. So again, my concern is safety. It's safety for me, it's safety for my friends, it's safety for the taxpayers of Mystic. It is safety for those we invite to our town to participate in the events in Mystic, whether it's when we gather again for the March parade, whether it's Pirate Days at the Seaport, whatever it is, we have a lot of foot traffic on River Road, and they use Star Street as well. I please ask the panel to consider that you do have the authority under section 4.52B, as Mr. Sweeney called out, to not permit 3 driveways accessing Star. Thanks so much for your time, gentlemen and ladies.
Thank you. Peter Roper.
Okay, now can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Could you put me on video, please?
There you go.
So am I on?
You'll have to enable your camera.
I'm not seeing any sign for video here.
Should have a symbol.
Nope, it's not showing up on mine.
It should be on your lower right side of your screen if it's a Windows screen.
It's a Mac and it says leave on the lower hand right side.
Look on the other side, on the left-hand side, lower left-hand.
It says mute. Oh,
Should say stop video or video. There should be a little
there's a
icon
mic. Audio.
right next to the mic. Is there an icon for? Oh,
There's
maybe.
an arrow. Now when I hit that, it doesn't have video that I can see. All right, never mind. I guess it's not to be. My name's Peter Roper. I live at 210 Pequot Avenue, Mystic. I'm also representing Barbara Nelson, who lives next door to this proposal at 73 Star Street. She's 91. She's spent her whole life in Mystic, living next to a single lot, and loves her neighborhood, loves the character of the neighborhood. First of all, I'd like to thank you on the commission for your volunteer efforts. I did that for 24 years, and I know it's a little bit thankless, but I appreciate your efforts and thank you for your time. And I also thank staff for working for the good of Groton. Appreciate that too. I'll just reiterate that I think this is an overdevelopment for this neighborhood. It may be allowed. I think that the zoning is probably wrong here. And if it continues and more lots start doing this, it changes the whole nature of this part of Mystic and not for the better. It is, as Mr. Sweeney mentioned, a fairly rural area, and he is trying to change that, unfortunately, to make it a more of a more of a downtown area with tiny lots. I guess I would be more comfortable if they were just splitting this lot, because it is a big lot, and there would be room for 2 houses. But to me, it doesn't seem like a place for 3 houses. Mr. Sweeney argued against the sidewalk because it's a rural area, and I would argue against the 3-lot subdivision because there's nothing else in this area that matches that. There's no other place where a 3-lot subdivision has come in that I know of in this immediate area that, again, is a big change. If we're going to intensify by doing 3 lots where there's not one, with its driveways and with probably, I would say, easily 4 more cars coming and going for the 2 additional lots. That is an encroachment and a significant increase in traffic in this block. I believe there's a sidewalk on Cliff Lane, 1 lot away, and a sidewalk would be helpful. There are a lot of people. I spent some time there at Barbara Nelson's as a caregiver. She enjoys watching people walking by, and it's a pretty steady stream of walkers with dogs, with carriages, groups, single people. So I think that part of the responsibility of a developer who has rights to do development is to do a sidewalk which would benefit everybody in the community. It would benefit the entire community. And I would encourage the commission to require the sidewalk. And I know there's some disadvantages to that, but I think the advantages outweigh it. I appreciate the chance to speak, and I wish you all well and knowledge in your deliberations. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let's see, Elizabeth Nato.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can.
This is Chuck Nato, 380 High Street. I'm at the corner of High Street and Star Street at the top of the hill. I have two concerns. My first concern is no one has brought up the fact of Star Street Hill. Going down Star Street Hill, it's a hill they used to sled down, and they still sled down when they haven't plowed it yet. And you do build up a good head of steam going down there. And so, that will be carried to these lots. That's just my concern with that. So that could be considered a hazard also. The other thing is I'm wondering, with these 3 lots, does the frontage meet the requirements in the zoning regulations? And I'm not sure what those requirements are. That's all I have.
All right.
All right, thank you. Peter Troop.
Yes, Ms. Jones, thank you. Thank you for calling on me. I'm Peter Troop. I'm a homeowner at the corner of Star Street and River Road at 99 River Road. I too have concerns about safety, and I also have concerns about the fundamental character of the neighborhood, and in particular open space. But first is the safety. I mean, as has been pointed out already, I mean, the addition of 3 driveways along our narrow rural street creates fundamental safety issues for everyone who uses the street. As Leah pointed out, there are scores of people that walk the street daily. I'd also add there are dozens of cyclists that are on the street daily. And then, as has been commented on, the summer vehicular traffic is quite something. And the addition of 3 driveways on that one side of the street, I mean, without question, creates safety issues for all who use it. I'd also point out that there is a sidewalk, as was just mentioned, on one side of Cliff Lane. In fact, there was a photograph of that in the slide set that was referenced at the start of this meeting, but the attorney didn't show that one. But it's right at the corner of Cliff and Star Street, and the addition of sidewalks, especially if they can be asphalt as opposed to concrete. And I appreciated the staff reference to the potential if that could be done that way. Would maintain would help maintain the rural character and would also add to the safety issue, or address the safety issue. In terms of open space, I strongly encourage the town to not provide a waiver to open space in exchange for a one-time payment. I mean, open space is an intrinsic attribute of the existing character of our neighborhood. And it's based on lots such as mine, which was set in the 19th century. I mean, and in our case with 99 River Road, it was in the 1850s. The idea of subdividing these lots into small parcels with effectively urban houses on them is just undermines the entire character of our community. And I really see it as a crime. So yeah, anything that can be done by the city, by the staff, to think about the opportunity they have to maintain this intrinsic character of what is Mystic, and that's why all of us are there. All of us who have been there all this time, it would be very much appreciated. So thank you.
All right, thanks for your input. We have anyone else, Deb?
Yes, Madeline Carney.
Back again to the Carney residents.
Hello, I'm John Carney. I live at 51 Star Street. And I just want to make the observation that once you allow this property to have 3 lots squeezed in, you're going to find land speculators all over this area, saying that since this was allowed here on Star Street, they're going to look for places throughout Mystic to cram another home here, another home there, and you're going to be sorry you ever made this mistake of allowing 3 lots to be homes. Thank you.
That's it for the 51 Star Street gathering.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have anyone else that wants to address us, Deb?
I do not see, oh, hang on. Let me just see, hand just went up somewhere. I need to scroll down. Looks like Leah Hartman would like to address you again.
Go ahead, Leah.
Take that up. I was just curious, I had sent a couple questions to the commissioners regarding information, please. One, Olga did mention the significant ledge in the area and the development of the property. We do have significant runoff down Star Street. It often pools in front of 55 Star Street property and ices over. And as been noted, Star Street is pretty narrow, so it does create a hazard there without a sidewalk. Secondly, the town has been very generous. If anyone were to drive around the neighborhood, to actually have put in curbing around the corner of Star Street and Grove Street. That is because the runoff is so significant, it needed to be redirected to the road drains that were in place. A year ago, we had icing in that four corner stop sign area across the entire intersection of Star, Grove, River Road, and Pearl. So there is significant runoff there. I don't know if that's a concern then when people do go forward to build on these lots, and if that's a different issue versus planning and zoning versus planning. But I did want to flag that we do have serious issues there. So I did put those things into the chat, and I don't know if that is captured for the record. And that's why I appreciate being heard again. Thank you, Ms. Jones, and thank you to the commissioners.
Thank you. Peter Springsteel.
Yes, Peter Springsteel. I live at 105 Star Street, which is just up the hill a bit from this property. I spoke last time, and I am against a 3-lot subdivision here. I think it's out of character. I think a 2-lot subdivision without sidewalks is the way to go here. And in recognition of all the opposition, I would implore the developer, I assume he's listening. If not, I think Mr. Sweeney will take it back to him, that if he looks at this as a 2-house pro forma, there's probably just as much profit in that as a 3-house pro forma. I had a similar situation occur right behind me, where the property owner wanted to subdivide. And then he put the house on the market, and he found out that he could get all his profit by keeping the lots combined and selling the house for a much higher price. In this case, he sold it for $1.1 million, which is unprecedented in this neighborhood. So I would encourage the developer to look at a 2-house subdivision. I think you can make as much money doing that. There's obviously, there's a profit motive here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Going down through them, hold on. No, I don't see anyone else.
All right, so we'll open it up for any comments or questions from commissioners.
Mr. Chairman.
I'll start with you, Hal.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, would it be appropriate for me to respond to any of those comments or to
Well,
rebut
I'm
them?
going to keep notes, and then I like to go through the commissioners first and then
That's
come
fine.
back to you
However you'd like to do it, sir.
and keep in order, just to try to keep things in an orderly fashion. But I think we should hear from the commissioners now.
I appreciate that.
Well, keep track of. So you should get your chance to respond. We should have no open questions when we close the hearing. So the next first person would be Hal, if you want.
And are we keeping the hearing open at this point?
Yes. No, these are, I want to go through all the commissioners and just keep going around in a big circle until
including
all the
panel
questions are have been answered.
Okay.
Or concerns have been addressed.
Few things to bring up here is that one of us staff, how long has this zone been in place for this zoning in this area? Since forever? I mean, I came here and it was there, but been there for quite a while, correct?
Certainly as long as I've been working here, which is 30 some odd years.
This isn't a new thing that's been imposed. Unfortunately, this is one location where it's been realized how tight it can be, but it's not a new thing that's been imposed. So I don't think it's our place. I'm afraid it's not our place to now question what's been in place for longer than I lived here too, but I've only been here for 25 years, so I'm a new guy. But it's been here longer than that, I believe. I do agree that this is what happens when, forgive me, Mr. Sweeney, when greed takes over and takes the day. I mean, you win with this. This is just the way it works. But I think I'll even agree with my profit motive that this is one of those projects where it looks like I've been in a position, and I'm sure Peter Springfield's been in a position where it's doing what you should do versus what you can get away with. And this has been designed to do what you can get away with, and you can. It's legal. It's the way it was written. It's squeezed in. That's the way the regulation's supposed to be. So I kind of can't argue with that. I did notice that someone said, what's the point of the regulation? Well, if the regulation wasn't there, you could put 12 row homes in that spot. So we're not. We're going to put two, according to this plan, 2 houses on the street. Everyone's been discussing the 2 versus 3. The impact on Star Street in terms of what it looks like will be 2 homes. I wish the 3rd one wasn't there, but neither will it be that evident. Excuse me a minute. Oh, okay, all right. So I can't fault this. It's not 3 homes in a row, which technically they could do. It's 2 homes, which we've heard several people say that should be okay to have 2 homes, and 1 in the back. So the 1 in the back is a problem for the property owner in the back of them, who I have great compassion for, that they've had the benefit of an enormous front yard that wasn't theirs. I don't know what to do about that. It's always been allowed to do. And if the prior owner wanted to triple the size of their house and move it back to 20 feet in front of the rear lot line, 3 stories high, they always could have. Someone could have bought that property and knocked down the original house, put up a new house that was horrible. This is permitting this kind of thing. I'm sorry. We don't have any reason not to allow that, I don't think. I do think that I'm looking at that we cannot make them put in 1 driveway to serve the 2 rear lots, but the amount of impact that it removes is enormous. And I just wonder, if in fact you just say, well, we'll look into it, does nothing, because then you won't. But the more we can get an agreement on to just having the single driveway there, which also means there would only be 1 front-facing garage. So I have 2 houses, 1 front-facing garage. That would preserve the character of that street, in fact. It also means there will only be 2 curb cuts, and right now there are 2 curb cuts in that property. So the impact would just be further diminished. The house in the rear does not impact what it looks like on Star Street. So I'd be for that, though it's right, we can't compel them to do that. I kind of agree with the need of, even if it's pieces of sidewalk here and there, I think I'm very familiar with bicycles and pedestrians and cars in the same place in Star Street. And I'm afraid as much as I just assumed it looked rural, it isn't rural exactly now. And it needs a sidewalk, even if it's at the cost of moving a tree or a couple trees. I'm sorry, we already mentioned about ruining the character. I don't know that in this one place, in this one situation, in the zoning that's allowed this for 20 some years, suddenly this is opening the floodgates. It's always been there, and this is one of the few we've actually had a problem with. So I really can't see, based on that being the problem. I am hoping that perhaps reevaluation does kick in, and as Peter Springsteel mentioned, it's probably is more worthwhile to put 2 homes rather than 3 on there, but that's something we can't rule on, the only reason. In regard to open space, I don't know that the idea of the open space is primarily not just to put breathing space and breathing room into these, is to provide recreational, and having a fund for buying up additional land has been so successful in this town, monstrously successful. So that's the appropriate use of this. I do understand that the hope was if we don't allow it, then that makes the lot too buildable, a lot too small, and they can't do it. I can't see going there for that reason. I would like to put in there that it's been pointed out a couple times in a couple different ways, is that there's already a bit of an obstruction of the sight line from the existing driveway, the over discussed driveway, existing driveway, and now we want to add a tree, is that should, whatever new plants get put there or adjusted, should take into consideration sight lines from the end of that driveway and not make it worse. So that's one thing, that whatever gets put there should be placed far enough back so that it fixes their problem, or certainly doesn't make it worse. So with that, we'd assume put in the sidewalk and the asphalt sidewalk. It's not crazy about asphalt sidewalks, but it's in character with what's there, and move the stone wall. You certainly don't want to lose that, but it's just a stacked stone wall. It's finished stone, so it's not that difficult. I think that's all I've got.
All right, Barbara.
Oh, I do have one more question. Excuse me, one more question. There was a discussion about the driveway, the existing driveway. And this is one I guess I have to ask staff, is to, assuming right now it is what it is. What we've been presented with is the facts we have to rule on. But it's well taken that if the suit goes through, they have every right to do that at any time, at any place, and it's successful for some reason, which is, there's some potential, then what happens if it in fact then makes this non-compliant? Does that stop? Does that rescind our approval because now it doesn't meet it? Or do we have to say something about that? I just want to make sure we're covered on that, and not if other attorneys, if they can, we can't do anything about it now, but do we need to address it, or is it something that takes care of itself?
We would, this is Bruce Hoffman from Office of Planning and Development Services. I would think we would want the town attorney to look at that if that were to happen, if that case was approved. And I guess I would kind of defer to that review at that time.
All right. So long as it's, I don't want it to happen that say, well, if he then comes back and says, well, had the Planning and Zoning Commission not made a decision, then I can do this. But since they made a decision, we can't do that. I don't want to have forced a situation where he has a right to question it, and we have a right to, this is the minimum we want to do. We don't want to do anything worse than this. So if in fact it does get worse because that's not the way the property is, then I want to be able to backtrack a bit and fix it. It's not a total loss. The property isn't lost. So heaven forbid this happens. Maybe you could reconfigure this and you'd still have 3 properties, but it would change. That's all.
Okay, Barbara.
Yes, I have a couple of questions for staff. How much open space would be required if we were to require open space rather than the fee?
Sure. Well, it's generally 10% of the lot. So the lot is 41,000 square feet. So it would be about 4,100 square feet of open space.
Would that prevent a 3-lot subdivision?
I'm just trying to do, I believe they would still have the land area. It would depend on, the way it was divided up. It would be close. It would have to be something we would look at. I mean, there's 41,000 square feet, you know, so 36,000 square feet is required. So it depends how they cut it out. It really is. But it would be close.
Well, you got 12,000 feet per lot minimum, right? Times 3
Yeah.
is 6,000.
Right.
So it would come out pretty close.
It would seem to me that if we were to require the open space, then you could not have 3 lots there.
Well, you said they're 41,000 feet, Bruce.
Yeah, there's 41,695 square feet.
About 37,000 feet.
36.9.
There's 36.9. So we'd have to, we would certainly have to look at that, because then you would have to, you know, you'd have to take frontages into account, and also that rear lot number 2, the access way isn't counted towards the lot area of that lot. So that lot 2, I believe, is actually 16,000 square feet in area, but only about 12,000 is counted. So we would have to look at it. That would be a whole nother proposal that we'd have to check, that we'd have to look into, but it would be close.
In the past, I think we have deferred sidewalks. Not that we have said, no, you don't have to build the sidewalk, but that, yes, you do, but you don't have to do it until perhaps an adjacent property owner or someone else on Star Street would have to build sidewalks. Is that applicable in this case?
It's not within our subdivision regulations to just require an easement for the future installation of a sidewalk by the town. Yeah, I don't believe it was something I suggested to the applicant, but I don't believe they would like to go that route. I think they would either prefer to put in a sidewalk or not have a sidewalk at all, would be their preference. But they didn't seem that they were interested in the easement for a future sidewalk.
Or a sidewalk agreement.
As the sidewalk agreement is something that we have as an option in the zoning regulations. It's not something that we have in the subdivision.
Okay, that's all I have.
Sue?
Yeah, thanks. I guess the way I look at it, I think I support in this case the idea of an open space, even though it's a small amount. I think that would help to make it look certainly a lot more open. Might preserve some views for some people. With a neighborhood like that, and I know this from where I live myself, but sometimes you end up with some very slot type views from places you wouldn't expect. So, but it helps, at least not having so many buildings up, helps people at least have the small view they're used to and that they love. So, I mean, normally I think, yeah, the fee in lieu of open space has worked so well for this town, but in this case, I think I'd strongly recommend we do the open space portion. And I think having that in the right place could make a huge difference. And I really don't support having sidewalks there. I just don't understand that. So why that would be desirable. But anyway, that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, Steve?
Unmute myself there. I would agree with Sue that as far as the open space is concerned, I think that would mitigate some of it. And if it results in 2 properties versus 3, I think that that's, a positive. I looked at the aerial of the area, and I think this is going to be a congestion that is unnecessary for that area. And either Bruce or Deb, could you remind me again what sewer and water is in that area?
There's public sewer and water there. It would be
Public sewer and water. Okay. Yeah. So I think this is too much for this property. I would prefer 2 houses versus 3. That's about it.
Kevin?
Sure, I have several questions. So first, the attorney for the applicant, I thought in his summation at the first meeting did actually a very good job. And he really laid out our regulations as well as anyone I've heard within a subdivision out there. But, you know, we questioned the first time because he had used vernacular I never heard in the subdivision. And the first word was, you know, he loves Mystic. We really could question how deep was your love. And he replied very appropriately. Potentially the applicant would, you know, secure one of those spots, et cetera. And but the second point was, we asked the question, which he did not address at the start of this, is would you consider putting in an application for 2 lots or withdraw based upon what the neighbors, if there was great opposition from the neighbors? But he was very appropriate again. And he said, it's not appropriate at this time. So that's where we left that. But the one thing, when we talked about the trees, and like others, I visited this site a great deal. And, you know, while I'm maybe a bit of a tree hugger, some of those trees are not in great shape. So within our draft proposal, if we were to say, you know, I think which it does say there that those trees should be replaced in kind or in like, if need be, I would appreciate that, because I also believe, I believe it's that large evergreen does restrict some of the movement back there. And then we talked about the sidewalk, and that was the second vernacular that the attorney used. He said a stairway to nowhere. And what a stairway to nowhere, what is that, some sort of cosmic, you know, jumping off point? You know, when you talk about a sidewalk in Mystic, it's a safe harbor. It's a safe harbor from, you know, the ways at people who are bringing people down Star Street. It's a safe harbor from, you know, our neighbors, you know, teenagers. A sidewalk is part of Mystic. We're not talking about rural Ledyard or rural Canterbury. A sidewalk is Mystic. I mean, so if we can get any type of sidewalk in there, which I believe the applicant said this evening, again, very appropriately, if that is a requirement, they're going to do it. So I believe, as I said, the sidewalk has to be part of it. The second point is, I agree with some of the other board members here that open space is very necessary. I mean, open space, by Sue's argument, is a great one, whereby do we need the money? Do we need the open space? Well, Hal said it correctly. Open space was designed to provide recreation, but open space in a very highly congested area is desirable. So why are we going to waive something like open space in this particular application? So I would like, as I said, both open space and sidewalk as far as this is concerned. But I just wanted to go back to something else, and I asked the staff this because Olga at 43 Star Street did a lot of the quotation of the qualitative side of this regulation. And a lot of times I don't believe in I don't know understand the qualitative versus the quantitative side. So has that been tested within the town of Groton, either in court or with, you know, by staff, on the qualitative elements that Olga provided? So either Deb or Bruce, if you can answer that question. Has it come up as an issue where something has either been denied or approved based on that qualitative language?
Are you referring to the qualitative language regarding the density calculation that I provided at the previous meeting?
No. So Olga was quoting some of the qualitative language in the regulation about the quality of life, et cetera. And part of zoning regulation, and now the PCC, is, has that been tested anywhere within the town of Groton when they talk about the quality of life? Have you heard that anywhere before, Bruce?
Understood. So what Ms. LaBella was referencing to, they were, let's see here. So they're more goals of the subdivision regulations and not the standards. So she wasn't speaking to the standards of the regulations. So the purpose of the subdivision regulations, yes, is to preserve the character of the town, to you know, make sure everything is in accordance with the zoning regulations and things like that. And like Hal said before, if there was no regulations, you could have 12 houses on this one lot. So the goal of the subdivision regulations is to be in conformance with the zoning regulations and also preserve the character of the neighborhood. So that's the purpose. So this, then you go into the standards and it's, does this meet the zoning regulations, which is district, 12,000 square foot lots. It meets the frontage requirements, and that's what you look to. So you look to the standards. The purpose is always going to be to serve the benefit of the town, the neighborhood, the aesthetics and things like that. But when you go to the actual standards, you have to look to the regulations and does it meet the zoning regulations or the subdivision regulations? Hope that answers your question.
It does. It divides it very well. And then I just already have two other points, Mr. Chairman. So one of the things that the applicant's lawyer said tonight in referencing the wetlands across the street is that USGS is not accurate within a couple hundred feet. And since I work with USGS and NOAA and NIST all on measurements and algorithms and stuff, that didn't seem quite right. So when I looked it up, actually the USGS 7.5, as far as a horizontal map is concerned, with a scale of 1 to 24,000 means that you have 1/50th of an inch. That means 40 feet. So the accuracy is 40 feet, not the couple hundred feet that the attorney represented. So does that matter? I mean, Bruce or Deb, again, does that matter, you know, where he represented something at 200 feet when it's only 40 feet?
Well, I think I can't really speak to the exact scale on that, but I think the
But
overall,
I know it very well, and that is the scale as far as USGS is concerned.
It's not the USGS that was referenced. It's the soil survey. And it is not an accurate representation of wetland soils, which is why the Inland Wetland Agency requires that it be ground truth by a soil scientist. The statute, as Attorney Sweeney had noted, it's pretty clear. It says if an application involves land regulated as an inland wetland or watercourse, then the applicant has to go to the Inland Wetland Agency for a report. So the land of this subdivision does not have wetlands on it. So you are looking at the creation of lots here. The Inland Wetland Agency actually looks at activities. You know, the construction of a driveway, the construction of a house. If there's an activity that ends up being within 100 feet, in this case, of a regulated wetland that's defined by a soil scientist, it is possible that they may need to get a permit for that. It's also possible the wetland agency may say that's not going to have an impact on the wetland, so you don't need a permit for it.
Great, that really defines it well. And then my last point was, and it's not a legal precedent, so I don't know if the attorney wants the actual applicant to answer this, but there is precedent within the Mystic Fire District, not within our town, but within the fire district. And it's detailed on September 5th, 1999, when the Woolman Construction Company chose to put up a very large 5-story in the old Mystic Fire District, which is right next door, 5-story hotel replacing the Ramada Inn. The September 5th, 1999 article by the iconic writer, Steve Slosberg, is very detailed that when the neighborhood pushed back and said, this is not appropriate for Mystic, the Woolman said, with precedent that is not legal precedent, they said, I'm your neighbor. So if you push back enough and you don't want this, I'm not going to build it. So my question, I think either Sweeney or the applicant is going to reply to some of this stuff. The neighborhood clearly is pushing back. I mean, do you find that to be a legal precedent in a very small town? A precedent, not a legal precedent. And that, Mr. Chairman, is all my questions.
All right, thanks. We just had a couple of items on the sidewalk. I think that we should, if we want a sidewalk, it should be there for a purpose and not as a punitive action, and the same with open space. Though I thought about originally that might be one way to keep it down to 2 lots in there, but I thought there was enough actual square footage to squeeze in, you know, take the open space out and still meet the 12,000 square footage per lot. But for staff, when do we have to close the hearing on this? Is there a date that we have to meet?
Yeah, so so the deadline to close the public hearing right now is 35 days after it was opened, would be March 2nd. So you do have one more meeting before the March 2nd deadline, and that's February 23rd. You do not have to close the public hearing tonight. Then obviously you need to make the decisions 65 days after the closing of public hearing.
Right. Well, okay. So we need to just get everything out on the table tonight, so we don't have to have more information added. That's what we're saying.
Well, yeah, I mean, you don't want to close the public hearing if you want more information to come in.
No, I mean, we have to make sure all the questions or issues have been addressed. I mean, procedure-wise, we can accept new input for that, but not anything to do with it. So I'll open it up back to the applicant's attorney for his response, and keep going around and get everybody heard again if they have new input.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate that. And certainly if there's new info, I don't have a problem with it. Unfortunately, sometimes public hearings become like a game of Pong where you hit the ball back and forth. And I certainly don't want that to happen. And we've been around several times and people have certainly had an opportunity to speak. I want to address just some of the comments from the public. A lot of them were repetitive of the last hearing. And I think I addressed those in my initial presentation to the commission. I do want to address the comments of Attorney Slater. You know, he is a well-respected colleague, and I appreciate his comments. I would reiterate what Deb Jones has said about what the state statute says in terms of whether a wetland application is required. This property does not contain wetlands, and therefore there is no concurrent application necessary to the wetlands, regardless of what's going on across the street. And I would also point out that I did check the inland wetland regulations, and they're a mirror of the actual regulation that's in your subdivision regulations, making that point clear. I also want to address this issue of open space because, as I said before, it's important that whatever the commission does, it has to follow its own regulations and state statutes. And the idea that open space would actually be required on this parcel makes little sense to me. And quite frankly, as I look at your regulations, it's completely inconsistent with the provisions of your regulations. And I want to read to you a section in section 4.9, parks, playgrounds, and public area reservations, and which is the section of your subdivision regulations that governs your ability to require an open space dedication equal to 10% of the land area. And in section 4.9, you have a subsection 4 that talks about sites for open space dedications. And I want to read this to you. I want this part of the record because tonight I've heard some suggestion that open space can be used to address neighborhood concerns, that open space can be used to limit lot number, that open space might be served as buffers, and that's not what your regulations allow. In fact, section 4, which is entitled sites, starts with subsection A, and it says, land so reserved shall be of a character and location suitable for the use as a playground, a playfield, or for other public purposes, and shall be relatively level and dry, and shall be improved by the applicant to reasonable standards required by the Planning Commission, which improvements shall be included in a performance bond. Said improvements may include providing access, landscaping, play equipment, and other reasonable improvements. It also goes on to say that the commission may permit the dedication of sites which contain unique, distinctive characteristics, such as a marsh or a swamp, if it is determined that there would be no demand for active recreation and if the area possesses some unusual qualities. That's not the case here at all. The idea to require effectively 4,000 square feet of this land to somehow penalize, I think the chairman put it right, the applicant, or to provide some type of a buffer to a neighbor, that's not what your regulations provide for. That's not the purpose of them. Your regulations go further though, under the payment of fees in lieu of, which we've proposed. And again, we got an appraisal and are offering, I think, $21,500. And it makes clear that this is exactly the situation where a fee in lieu of is appropriate. It says under subsection 5 of parks, playgrounds, and public area reservations, where dedication of open space will not meet the purposes of this section. We just talked about what the purposes are. The subdivider may, with approval by the commission, pay a fee to the town or pay a fee to the town and transfer land to the town in lieu of the requirement to provide open space. So I would submit to you that, you know, requiring open space on a subdivision that's less than an acre is I've never seen it in 20 years of work, and I don't think it's appropriate. It's not supported by your regulations whatsoever. Also, Mr. Slater, Attorney Slater, excuse me, you know, raised this issue about an adverse possession claim. Attorney Slater is a good attorney, has a great reputation. Certainly, I believe he will zealously represent his client, and I can tell you that Mr. Gallagher and his family will defend any such suit. There is a deeded easement that was signed in 1984 by the predecessors in title to Miss Labella and Mr. Carney. It was signed by the Gannons as well, that make clear the access rights over the land that we own under the driveway. It also required maintenance responsibilities for the Labella and Carney properties to maintain the stone walls and the land between them. So you can absolutely file any civil claim you want in court. That's just a claim though. And until it's adjudicated, it can't be considered by this commission. I would submit that if you approve the subdivision, and if by some fact pattern, the plaintiff is successful, the approved subdivision will be filed. Those lots are of record. And if any land comes out of those lots will be pre-existing, non-conforming, they'll be legal lots of record. It's no different than when you have a subdivision and the state of Connecticut comes by with a highway project and seizes your land through eminent domain. That doesn't make your land unbuildable. It's still a record building lot. I also want to respond to some of the comments of Mr. Carney. He indicated that we can't use the land under his father's driveway easement. That's not true. The 1984 agreement allows us the right of access. We also have an implicit right to maintain if necessary. We also pay tax on that property. Not that that is an important issue for land use or for adverse possession, but we certainly are the legal owners of that property. And I think one of the issues, I think that, and to be fair, I know Mr. Carney did admit that he was, he didn't have a full understanding of some of these issues, but he's conflating the issue of a common access drive, which is what the driveway he has, and that you have that under a separate section of your zoning regulations with that of the minimum frontage for a frontage lot. I do want to just address an issue for Ms. Hautman, and I need to do this for the record. Ms. Hautman suggested that in her anecdotal opinion that there was a safety issue on Star Street. We have a licensed engineer on our team with Mr. Fettis, and I'd like to ask Mr. Fettis a few questions just to put on the record. Mr. Fettis, if you could unmute yourself, please.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Mr. Fettis, can you just state for the record your licensure here in the state of Connecticut?
Yeah, I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of Connecticut, license number 21231.
And Mr. Fettis, you prepared the subdivision plan that's before the commission tonight?
That's correct.
And you also prepared the alternate sidewalk and driveway plans, correct?
That's correct.
And Mr. There's been a question that's been raised about the safety of the subdivision plan, the original subdivision plan that you created. and the safety specifically to the issue of vehicular safety and pedestrian safety. Do you have a professional opinion as to whether this plan provides a safe vehicular and pedestrian movement in and around this site?
Yes, the individual driveways for each of the lots are properly spaced, properly designed per the town of Groton regulations, have been reviewed by the town engineer, Public Works, and found them satisfactory.
Thank you, Mr. Fettis. That's all I have for you. Further on Ms. Hauptman's comments, there was another concern about the notice. I went into that in great detail at the last meeting, and that the notice is fully compliant with your regulations, and that has been confirmed by your staff. I do want to address just a few comments from the commissioners, and then I'll complete my rebuttal. I know Mr. Zod, Commissioner Zod suggested that there may be greed involved here. I respectfully disagree. This is an issue of personal property rights, and that the rules that we're playing by are the rules that this commission has adopted. It's completely reasonable to stop and say, perhaps we need to change the rules. We need to change the zoning. We need to upzone this area. We need to put in different subdivision controls. But we're playing the game by the rules that you have adopted. It's your rules. And so it's not an issue of greed, it's an issue of personal property rights. Ms. Tarbox brought up a great point about the issue of putting sidewalks in a future installation by an agreement. I'd love to do that, but your subdivision regulations don't permit it. The entire idea of the future installation, and I've used this on other projects, I think it's a really great thing you have in your zoning regulations. It comes out of the sidewalks that are required by site plan approval in the zoning regulations. I think it's a great idea to look at for your subdivision regulations and maybe make some changes. I would agree to that in a second, but I have Mr. Slater and I have other members of the public who are obviously opposed to this. I don't see any authorization in your subdivision regulations to do that. But I certainly think it's a great idea. I wish we could do it like that. And then there would be money set aside for the time when the town wants to do that. Again, Ms. Sutherland and Mr. Hudasek, again, open space is not to be used for buffers. It's not for addressing issues of community character. It's for creating recreation playscapes for the general public, and that's clear in your subdivision regulations. I do appreciate Ms. Sutherland's comment regarding driveway against the sidewalks, which I agree with her, doesn't make any sense. And then finally, Mr. Fiftel, we have no intention of reducing the number of lots voluntarily at this time. That certainly has been discussed. I know a lot of the neighbors have suggested it's not something that we're interested in exploring at this time. Again, open space needs to be for recreation, and it needs to be for public purposes. And again, that's not what I heard the idea of requiring open space would include. I agree with Mr. Lothrin's comments to Mr. Feifel regarding the issues of quality life, character. These are really general purpose statements, and it's the actual standards that govern your subdivision review process. I also agree with Ms. Jones on the proper issue, the proper delineation and the accuracy of the USGS soil survey. And finally, his final question, I only deal in legal precedents. I don't deal in other precedents, and it's my job as an attorney. And finally, Mr. Pritchard, the chairman, I completely agree with you that the open space and sidewalk requirements should not be punitive. I hope that's not what they're being used for here. If you want a sidewalk at the end of the day, we have to provide one, and we will, and we've showed a plan to do that. But I believe that your subdivision regulations do not allow you to combine our driveways, nor does it allow you to assert the requirement for open space unless it meets the requirements of siting under your regulations. I don't see any reason to keep this hearing open. I hope you could close the hearing tonight and move forward with a decision at the proper time. Thank you for your time and attention this evening.
We'll open it up to anyone in the public that wishes to address new items. I don't think we need to hear regurgitation of the items that have already been identified. Is there anyone that would like to present any new issues in the public?
I see a couple of hands up. Madeline Carney.
This is Stephen. Hi, this is Stephen Carney of 18 Borough Street. I just wanted to point out to Mr. Fiftel that a great way to know if the standards are being met is to determine whether the goals are being met. And I would suggest that the goals aren't met, that's a strong indication that the standards aren't being met. When Mr. Sweeney talks about personal property rights, I would just remind the members of the board that Mr. Slater represents a human being and Mr. Sweeney represents a limited liability corporation. Mr. Fettis said that this is safe. There wasn't really a lot of information about that. And I would ask him, is the project risk-free? And I don't think he's prepared to say that. And to Mr. Zod, I just wanted to remind him of the area. He seemed to misrecall the area in regard to the elevation. And I do think that the third house would be extremely visible and would change the character in a way that only two houses would not. Obviously, one house is most preferable, but the elevation should be kept in mind there. And then just very lastly, it seems to me that the wetlands issue should be fully vetted, and it would be not proper for this board not to fully vet that issue. Thank you again for all of your work.
Just to respond to a couple of those items, I think your people are misreading the regulations, and it's a purpose of the regulation. Not, it just says these regulations are adopted for the following purposes. That's the justification for having the regulation. And for the wetlands, I think really only time it would come into place is for construction work or disturbing existing land. Nothing to do with changing lot lines, which is only shown on a drawing. Is there anyone else that wants to address this, Deb?
Yes, Ken Slater. And
Can I be allowed to join by?
yep, you are promoted to a panelist at this point.
Thank you. Touch on a couple of topics that were raised by Attorney Sweeney, and he is also a very able attorney who's done an excellent job for his client. It's obvious that his client is trying to get attempting within the rules of the zoning regulations to squeeze every nickel out of this property. And as you've heard from the property owners or the descendants of the property owners who are really unhappy that that's what they're doing, but they're attempting to do that under the rules. But those rules include your open space regulations, and your default under your open space regulations is that and I'm reading again from section 4.9 as Attorney Sweeney did, is that the Planning Commission shall require that land be reserved for parks and playgrounds, natural open space areas, or other public purposes. That's the default. You can in certain instances decide it would be better to receive the funds and represent towns that receive funds and do great things with open space funds. What we're talking about here is $20,000. You're not going to be purchasing a substantially valuable open space opportunity for the community with $20,000. What you can see, though, is you can see the Mystic River from the back of this property. And I will tell you from my own personal experience, I don't live in Groton. I live in Eastern Connecticut. My boys have been very fortunate to be part of and this will tie in, a Spanish exchange program. And they were able to go to Spain and bring Spaniards here. And when in Spain, they were able to see all kinds of amazing they were able to see mosques because they were in the part of Spain where that was a big influence in Spain, as well as Roman Catholic cathedrals, et cetera, et cetera. They were in Connecticut, these young men, these young boys who had lived in Spain, and we wanted to show them something in Connecticut. And we had every place in Connecticut to show them. We went to Mystic. And we walked around, we showed them some beautiful areas of Mystic. We had a little lunch at Red 36, and they looked at the water. That was what we showed them as the place to see in our state, in our country. Somebody who sits in the back, you set up an area in the back of this property with a park bench, doesn't have to be large. I don't disagree with Attorney Sweeney. This is a small area for having an open space, but it is also, Mystic is a unique area in the state of Connecticut and New England and the United States of America. If you require them to hold an area of open space that serves a public purpose, you have that discretion. It's not punitive. It's under 4.9 of your regulations. You don't have the discretion to change frontage. You don't have the discretion to change lot area. You don't have an ordinary frontage requirement. You have only 25 foot of frontage required. That's unusual in zoning. Maybe that's been in play for 25 years. I have no idea. That allows for lots being stacked behind other lots. That's the way that it is. But you do have discretion with open space. That's very well established under Connecticut law. You can decide whether this site is appropriate for that kind of open space or not. You absolutely have that discretion. Ask your town attorney. Don't count on me. Don't count on Attorney Sweeney. They'll tell you that. And there is an opportunity on this site, not a large area, but you don't need a large area. You can have a picnic bench and people can look and see a vista. And you have that here. Based on the elevations, based on where the river is, you have it. So we suggest that you do not waive the requirement that open space be incorporated into the plan. And maybe they can come up with a plan with 3 lots with open space, 2 lots with open space. That's not your concern. Your concern is in adhering to the regulations. Is there an opportunity for it? Fine. They might opt to say, I'm not going to give you a subdivision plan. I'm just going to cut it in 2 lots and I'll get my money that way. That's fine. That's their discretion, but you have the discretion here. I don't disagree with Commissioner Zakun saying that, the regulations are what they say they are, and they include the ability to do that with open space. With respect to the wetlands, again, I would suggest that staff consult with their counsel, because I believe that the meadow across has been flagged for wetlands. If it hasn't, the owner, and he was in the room, I was able to confer through my client who was in the room with through the Madeline Carney connection to this public meeting, that he would be willing to allow flagging if it hasn't already happened, to confirm as to whether or not this activity is within 100 feet. The subdivision statutes, the Connecticut general statutes regarding subdivisions, this isn't just a lot line revision, because lot lines, this is the ability to build 3 different homes involving grading, construction, etc. All of those things can involve impacts to wetlands. I'm not saying that we will impact the wetlands. I don't know. That's not known. And that hasn't been fully evaluated from what I have seen so far. If there's from the wetland flags, if they've actually been flagged, if it's only 90 feet, then I think this is a regulated activity, and it should have been evaluated by the Wetlands Commission as to whether or not this activity impacts the wetlands. If it hasn't been fully flagged, I can represent, after talking to my client, who's talked to the owner of the property with the meadows in the room that you'd heard from earlier before, that he would consent to someone coming onto the property to determine the flagging, so that you can determine whether or not this application involves a regulated activity, in which case an application should have been filed before this one was filed. So that's all I wanted to add tonight. And thank you for your consideration of all these issues and the concerns that are raised by the neighbors.
Thank you.
Anyone else, Deb?
Yes, Leah Hartman.
Thank you for letting me speak one more time. I do remain concerned about safety, and Mr. Fettis, I respect that you are licensed. The width of the driveway does not ensure safety of people walking on Star with their dogs, with their children, with people biking, with people running. This is not a rural street. This is a actively used by vehicle street. It will be even more actively used as we have 3 houses that are potentially under development. I fear for my safety presently when I walk the street. I walk attentively when I walk the street. But that is part of being in Mystic, is being a part of this neighborhood and being able to be on the road. So I do really respect the commissioners. I respect what your charge is. I don't envy you, but I am quite concerned about my safety and about the safety of my friends and about the safety of my guests. I'm not a taxpayer since September, since this property sale closed. I've been a taxpayer for many years. I rely on my elected and appointed officials to protect me as a taxpayer to the town of Groton and a citizen of Mystic. I care about the community. I care about my neighbors. I really beg you to consider that there only be 1 driveway access. I much prefer that there's only 2 lots, but that's not what I'm pushing for. I'm pushing for the safety of the people of the town of Mystic, please. And secondly, I think the open space is wonderful, and I think we would all appreciate that. When I look up River Road, those lot sizes are not 12,000 square feet. There was a zoning change in the early 2000s that created larger lot size just across the street of Star. That's where the new line was drawn. And I think Ms. Jones probably has access to that. She wasn't asked that question. She was asked about the other side of Star. So please consider our safety as taxpayers and residents of Mystic. Thank you so much.
Anyone else, Deb?
I do not see any other hands raised.
Okay.
Final rebuttal, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I'd like to go back around to the commissioners again. Hal, do you have anything else to add?
The only thing I think I'll kind of stand by most of what I said, and is but especially with respect to the open space, I kind of agree that what it talks about, I read it too, and it talks about pretty much if we want to put a pocket park in front of these houses someplace. It's not talking about buffer space in the rear somewhere where we'd like the extra space or to inject area somewhere. It's talking about having a little playground, or as we say, a bench and a lawn or something. That's not, I don't think we want that there. That's not a viewpoint anywhere. It's just in front of 3 houses or in front of 1 block. That's not at the river. That's not the place where you want to sit and stop. It is a place where you want to walk by safely. So I'd be in favor of the sidewalk. There's the pros and the cons, and I think the pros outweigh it, as is mentioned, to give some safe harbor, at least for that block as you're walking down the street. Because there's no place else to go once you're coming down there. That's all I have.
Okay. Barbara, do you have anything else?
Nothing further.
Sue, do you have else? Then?
I think just a comment on the open space. Given the topography of that lot, you got a 10-foot drop on the one side towards the river. And I think the potential is there to have a place people could stop. They could even bird watch and stuff. You don't have to be right next to the water to do all those things. And quite often you'll find small parks that are used and appreciated. So I would just say I wouldn't underestimate, especially it's by the river. You can see out to the river. Like they were saying, the houses are not as dense going north. So I mean, I think the potential would be there. And probably the people buying the houses might even appreciate it too. It's always nice to have a little more greenery around.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Steve, do you have anything else to add?
No, I'm good. I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Kevin, do you have anything else?
Yeah, just a couple quick things. So I don't believe the open space is punitive. I think which was mentioned before. But I believe you see two sides of it, right? And I believe before we move forward with this, I'd love to see an of council in the town of Groton make a determination on that versus, again, we're not here to adjudicate, but I think someone needs, within the town of Groton legal, needs to make an opinion as far as that's concerned. Second point, thank you, Deb and Bruce, because you both clarified it very well as Attorney Sweeney regarding wetlands. So I'm not sure, again, I'm not going to adjudicate that, but when you talk about USGS, you can't talk about USGS again unless you're going to admit that it's 40 feet, because that's the accuracy. I don't quite get that piece. And then when Greg provided the information on safety, and I respect all his professional certifications, the fact is there's no traffic plan submitted with this, right? Which would be odd for a subdivision of this size, but there is not. So to say that here, as the applicant, maybe you should submit a traffic plan that includes the safety as far as this road is concerned, in order to see this application through. So therefore, I'd like to see this continued and see both legal opinion and a traffic plan on it, Mr. Chairman. That's it.
Okay. I don't have anything else to add. So I go back to the applicant, if he has anything else he'd like to address.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Attorney Slater is correct that you have the right to require open space, and you have that right, as most commissions in the state have that provision in their regulations. But I would point you back to section 4.9 4A, which is your sites. And really this section provides you guidance when it is appropriate to take a dedication of open space, and then subsection 5, when it's appropriate to take a fee in lieu of. And I would submit to you that if you read that section, the kind of open space that you're talking about, which isn't a active playground or recreation area, should be reserved for unique features, things like marshes and swamps as suggested in the section. And I would submit that creating some type of a bench or a pocket park is not within the spirit of the regulation, nor is it within the letter of it. And that the fee in lieu of, particularly in this location, is only the only reasonable outcome. I've been doing this for 20 years, and in the time before that, I was a city planner up in Norwich, Connecticut. I can tell you, I've never seen a commission in all my years require a dedication for a 3-lot subdivision of less than an acre. It just doesn't make any sense. And I would urge you to consider taking the fee in lieu of, adding to the funds that Groton has really successfully used to secure and protect valuable open space for public purpose. And that's really what that section is for. This application cries out for that. As for the adjacent neighbor offering to let us flag their wetlands, that's great. We don't have any obligation to do so. I think Deb Jones has already made it clear that she's looked at the statute. This is not something for interpretation. This is clear language. I think the chairman brought up this issue of clear language. If the property that you are subdividing has wetlands, you have an obligation to submit a simultaneous wetland application. If it does not, if it's just off-site wetlands, you do not have to go to the Wetlands Commission. I think Deb Jones also properly said that there may be activities, construction level activities down the road, which may trigger a wetland jurisdictional review, but that's not at this point. So there's no need to address that issue. And again, we've submitted everything that's required of your regulations at this point. This is a 3-lot subdivision. There's no need for a traffic study or a traffic plan, in my opinion. This is a minor application before this board. I know there's a lot of neighbors who are upset with it, but you have your regulations. We've followed your regulations. My client deserves and is entitled to an approval. If you choose to have a sidewalk, that's fine. We'll put a sidewalk in, but you can't combine the driveways. And I suggest to you that you cannot require open space that does not meet the standards of section 4.9 4A, the site section. If it doesn't meet that, you can't require it. Thank you again for your time.
All right. Does anyone in the public have any new issues to identify?
I do, oops, I do not see any hands.
No, no hands. Okay, does anybody on the commission have anything they want to add to the public hearing? Other than debating on what we know? If not, I'd like to move to close the public hearing. Unless, does staff have any problem with closing it?
No, I don't. I would just suggest that, you know, if the commissioner is going in the route of requiring open space for this property, I would suggest that the director of Parks and Recreation review it, because, you know, the intention of this would be for public purposes, parks, playgrounds, and recreation. And I think his comments would be valuable, but that can happen after the public hearing is closed. That can happen after the public hearing is closed.
Well, we just have to make a decision or put it in the motion to say that the open space would be as approved by.
Mr. Chairman, just one question. Open space, I mean, does it have to be a park? I mean, I have an open lot in our neighborhood.
No, it does not. It doesn't.
Yeah, so I don't understand this, you know, it has to be a park.
No, but the town has to maintain it. And
That's right.
So if it's really small, it may not get maintained very well.
Right.
And it may look horrible, who knows? I mean, the Parks and Rec hasn't been referred to them to say, do we need it or want it? Usually because it's so small of an area. I would think it's more of a debate issue whether we want open space or not, or take the fee.
Or we get a legal opinion on it of council, Jeff.
No, it's not, we can require it.
Sorry?
We can require it.
Right, I get that. But I also thought the attorney for the applicant argued very logically why we shouldn't, right?
No, yeah, but it's our decision.
I get that.
We don't have to have, it's not a legal question. Can we or don't or not? It's our decision. So I don't think it has anything to do, we don't need a legal opinion from the town attorney.
Can I interject, please? Is that there's kind of a practicality to it. We're saying, oh, open space. Well, right. For the record, I'm not, but I don't see where on this site you would put such a space. I don't know where that would go. Behind the stone wall, in front of someone's house. I mean, the site's only what the site is. It's not a 50-acre site with views and meadows and whatnot that we can take a chunk of. And there's no place that we can put it next to anything where it can be conjoined. I don't see anywhere on this site where you can take an area and inject it as you just want to have space. And I don't know where that is on this site.
But who makes a determination on where to put the open space? It's the applicant, right?
No,
Well,
it's
fine,
you.
but we don't want to make it to be impossible.
Is
It's
it?
possible.
That's correct.
Where
No,
would
is
it
the
go?
Commission or who?
I mean, we can just say you have to do it, but then if it's impossible, then he'll come back and says, I don't know what you're talking about. And I agree. I don't know where to put it. In an ideal word, I don't know where to put it on this site. If we're going to take something and hand it over to Parks and Rec, where on this site would it go if we had the choice?
Well, it has to have public access. It means it has to have street access.
Right, so it has to be by the sidewalk for the sledders or something like that, Hal.
Correct. So
Yeah.
where would it be on this site?
Well, next to Star Street, because then you would have a better chance of a view and you'd have your access.
Well, fine. So that's, you're one of these things in front of these people's homes.
Well,
That's
to be
the
really
choice.
at the side. If it's on the
Has to-
north side, I'm sorry, the west side of the property,
So when the
it wouldn't be in front of the
corner in
house.
front of his house, I mean, that's still in front of somebody's house.
It would be in front of the house.
Yep.
It'd be by the side, right?
By the front, it's in front. It's facing that way. So if I, in fact, had a little more room, I'd say, okay, fine, carve out a corner. Corners are nice if you've got them. I don't even see a corner that's available here. So I think it's unique to the site that there's no place here to put what we're asking for if we actually want space. I think ideally we'd want some space in the back or the side, and that we can't do that. We have to have public access. So I don't know where it could go. And if we, among us, we don't know where it can go, we shouldn't be asking the applicant to put it somewhere.
Oh, but they have designers. It wasn't on my resume to be able to say where open space is going.
Well, some of us came from this field and I don't know where it would go. I'm pretty good at this stuff. I don't know where it would go. It's have to be in front of someone's house, and we don't want it in front of someone's house.
Well, it's like the ones on BB Pond, you know. I thought that was a bad idea, but I see people are using that all the time there.
Which one?
Well, like the Gosa one they put in with a couple chairs.
That's not on the pond, that's on the cove.
No, I know, but I'm saying it's a
That's-
small slot of an open space. And I was like, what?
But it has, yeah, but it has waterfront view.
Exactly, you got waterfront property, but I'm surprised at how
Right on.
popular it's been.
Yes, absolutely.
Because
You
it's,
know?
you know, you can walk to it. But anyway,
If instead of a wetland across the street, there was a pond, I'd say maybe that makes sense, but there isn't.
Well, there could be a pond across the street, right?
But there's.
If it's wet.
well, that's where the wet.
That's right, yeah, so come back and.
Sorry.
But
I'd like,
Still right.
so instead it's just wetland on the side of a hill, and we're saying to do it in general terms, but it's gotta have to go somewhere specifically. And I can't see it anywhere on this site where we would like it.
yeah, but do we have any reason to keep the public hearing open for this? I mean, the debate wise, we can debate forever on.
No.
You don't need. a public hearing.
No, I'm fine with closing it. I just want to interject that because more had
Oh.
gone on about the putting in that lot.
Does staff have any?
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
There's a member of the public who is interested in speaking before you close.
All right. Would you recognize him or him or her? Or whatever?
Ken Slater.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, I can dispense with the video part. In terms of where the open space could go, keep the public hearing open and we'll show, because you're concerned about people, the open space would be right in front of. Well, there'd be people who would likely prefer a small area devoted to the ability.
Lost you, Ken.
And have an area set aside where people could sit down and look into it, an open area, kept in its natural state, which is what one of the open space requirements could be, and they would be able to have a beautiful view. So I don't disagree with Attorney Sweeney. It's a very small site. It's an unusual site for open space, but Mystic is an unusual place, and it's an unusual opportunity. And to say that you assume that people nearby are going to have a problem with where the open space would, keep the public hearing open, and we'll show you some suggestions, or simply require the applicant to come back with a plan that has open space, or to be able to demonstrate to you that it can't happen. So to reject out of hand that there can't be open space incorporated in the plan, we disagree with, and that's all I wanted to add.
Okay.
Thank you.
But if, Deb, if we did come back and ask for locating open space, would that require the public hearing to stay open? Or
If
can
you're
that-
asking for new information, yes.
Yeah,
I guess that would be then.
right.
So if we close the public hearing, basically we were saying we cannot ask for, or we would have to identify it as, let the OPDS determine where it goes. Just say we want.
Right, you can't take new information if the hearing's closed.
But we could direct the OPDS to make the determination where it's realistic to put the open space.
You can take information from staff.
Yeah, but we don't have, it could. But
Right,
that
if
would-
the hearing's closed, you can take information from staff.
Yeah.
But we haven't voted on it yet either. It's
No,
kind
I
of
know.
it's a little bit of the cart before the horse.
On what?
Well, we're really asking, I
Oh,
mean,
if
given
we
now,
really- if we want open space, then I guess
Yeah.
we should leave the hearing open.
but we really don't know if we do or not. That's all I'm saying. We haven't voted on that. And it's kind of like, given the contentiousness of this particular application, which I understand and sympathize, maybe it isn't a bad idea to err on the side of caution. But that's all I have to say. Is it,
Yeah, but it's really, I don't know how we really debate it. If we don't have a motion, we can't debate it. So you have to have close a public hearing to have the motion.
they were offering new information, that's all. So
Hmm?
they were offering new information on where to put the open space and things like that. And I thought, maybe given the circumstances, it's not a bad idea to let people at least have a chance of doing it. But that's my opinion.
I mean, you can,
I think the first thing you got to do is you got to decide you need the open space.
yeah, that's what I would think.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So,
I don't know what people's, I mean, if you go around and ask everybody if they really think we need it.
I think you need to decide whether or not you have enough information here to close the hearing and then have your discussion. If you
Yeah.
want additional information to help you decide on this subdivision, then you should keep the hearing open and specify what information you want.
We want input as to where the open space should go, if it can go someplace. That doesn't necessarily need to be directly from the hearing. People can issue letters and let you know, and we can receive it that way outside of the public hearing, can't we?
Not from the public. You can't get new
No.
disclosed.
that's the problem, it's new information.
But from staff, you
From
can.
staff, you can. That's right. You can discuss things with staff.
That's what I'm saying. So staff can be a filter of that.
Yeah, but
Well,
Not if it's new. No.
No, we can't.
No, we're not going to be a conduit for no.
The only problem with it, I guess, is that if we wanted 4,000 square feet of open space, it would change the lot arrangement. And that we couldn't do, right? I
Why
think
not?
you can, after the public hearing is closed?
You can, when you make your decision. If you decide you want open space in a particular spot, you can make that decision.
But what happens to the lot sizes then? I mean,
The existing thing could not be approved because it
we
doesn't
can't
show open
approve the
space.
application then.
No, you can, when you close the hearing and you consider the subdivision, you can say whether or not you want open space. You can tell them where you want it. You cannot approve a subdivision that has area that's less than what zoning requires.
No,
Mr.
but then
Chairman?
they would have to change the plan.
Mr.
And that
Chairman?
happens on occasion. You have, I mean, it's been a while, but you have approved subdivisions with modifications.
Right. Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes.
Before
State
you
law.
go ahead, Hal, I know you looked at the plan and you couldn't figure out where it would go. I'm thinking the northwest corner it could go.
Yep. That's what I said.
Yeah,
There are
but
two
the only
votes.
question is, can we change lot lines, or do we just say they have to come back with a rearrangement that all we're approving is 3
Well,
lots?
it seems that Deb said that they could.
Hmm?
That they could come
Chairman,
back
can I
with
be
site
recognized?
modification.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
state law and your regulations allow you to approve a subdivision, deny a subdivision, or modify and approve a subdivision. Those are your 3 choices. You can't you aren't supposed to condition a subdivision, but you can modify what's been submitted and then approve it. So I just want to be clear and back up what Deb Jones had indicated to you.
Yeah, but can you modify it by just saying we want to take 4,000 square feet out for an open space.
You have the, as Attorney Slater indicated, you have the right to require open space instead of the fee in lieu of. You have that right. I've submitted to you that you can only do that if it meets the site requirements that I've laid out for you. I still don't hear anything that would suggest this open space is unique and distinctive like a swamp or a marsh.
It doesn't have to be. If you read the first paragraph in section 4.9, it allows you to have it just, it can be idle land. It doesn't have to be a playground.
It doesn't have to be a playground, but it has to. Yeah, I understand your position, sir. I'd ask you to read the site section again, because I don't think the land that you're asking for meets the standard.
It says for other public purposes. It says the planning commission shall require that land be reserved for parks and playgrounds, natural open space areas, could be open land, right? Or other public purposes, which is, that's in 4.91 general.
Right.
Right.
So, and I'm asking you to read 4.94, sir, A.
That's below that.
It is, and it's more specific, and it gets into what land. It says land so reserved shall be of a character. If you read that, I think it's pretty clear it's supposed to be for.
And it says for other public purposes. It says the same thing. It says it can be used as a playground, playfield, or for other public purposes, which could be open space to sit down with a bench, and shall be relatively level and dry so you don't get the wetlands in there, which has happened before. So it allows you to have open space just for open space. It is allowable by what it says. But I don't know that I agree that in this case, you want it.
I share your opinion.
That's my personal opinion. But I'm just concerned whether we can debate that as a commission after, close the public hearing and then debate it at that time and make the decision whether we want it or not. But if we can modify it, I guess we can do that.
I see another hand raised, member
Yes.
of the public.
Mhm.
Peter Roper.
Yes.
Peter Roper, 210 Pequot Avenue. I just like to request that you keep the hearing open. It sounds like you had an offer of someone that would propose a site for an open space. There seems to be interest in doing this, and I think it's better to discuss it when the public and the developer and the whole ball of wax can be involved in talking about it. So it just means one more meeting. I don't think it's a big deal. So to me, it seems like a good idea, and I think it could be done. So I think you should get other opinions on how it could be done. And even the developer may want to propose something that would work with his plan. Thanks.
Okay. So we can hold, maybe we should hold it open. I don't know.
Well, I respect the opinion of the 24-year retired member.
Yeah. Well, what I'd be concerned with, is it practical or realistic? So maybe we should say we want to open it up for the applicant to come up with a proposal to incorporate, if open space is required, where it would go. I don't know what the other commissioners feel like, if they have. Maybe we should just go around and ask everybody whether they would like to close a hearing, take a rough idea and see what we have. Hal, would you like to see a proposal for the open space?
Well,
What do you think?
personally, I don't think it's required, but I'm hearing that from the other members, that they're thinking there's some way to do it, and people think that's so. So maybe that's what has to happen. I will caution you is that I have been in a position in the past to try to get something. I've been on the other side of the bench to get something approved. And part of the position of doing that is to disprove what you're being forced to do. So if it's up to the developer to come up with where the park should be, he'll come up with a plan. He could easily come up with a plan that's so abhorrent that we would never dream of it.
That would answer the question, Al.
And so, and then you'd say, well, I guess you can't do it because of what he just designed. So that doesn't necessarily work. You certainly should have the opportunity to do so, though. I would agree that if we're going to say this is an option, then you should, just like coming up with the option for the single driveway, which he really doesn't want to do, but he showed it anyway. You should, I guess, come up with an option for what some kind of a, I'm still going to call it a pocket park. I don't know what else you'd call it, on that street would look like in the northwest corner, if that's the only place you're thinking of doing it. Complete with what views that would actually afford, what that would actually do. Give them the opportunity to just try that out, to shift the house back, and if so, what really fits? Because I'm kind of adding up the numbers here and I'm thinking it actually doesn't work with two. I hate to say that one of the mechanisms of requiring it is probably there to force them into only having two houses. That's not the proper mechanism for this. So yeah, I understand what you're doing, what neighbors might be doing. Well, force them to put this open space in and then it'll only be two houses. That's not what these regulations are supposed to do. So I understand sidestepping it. Then again, back to the what can you get away with kind of scenario, that would be part of it, but then that would not be the reason to have a park. The reason to have a park is not to stop someone from building a third house. It's because we want a park. So you have the two parts. One, does Parks and Rec want it at that location? That we're not going to get from the hearing. But the other part is to allow the applicant to come up with, if he provides one, this is what it would be. So I'd be okay with that because I don't see a way around it.
What are your thoughts, Barbara?
I think if the open space is located in the northwest corner, that would fit in quite well with the two driveway plan rather than the three driveway plan. So I'd like to see something along those lines. I would vote to keep it open.
So
Yeah, I think I agree with Barbara. That's kind of what I was saying, keep it on the west side towards the road there. And I would like to keep the hearing open. I would like to go over and take yet another look at the property too. I just think that'd be helpful at this point.
all right, Steve.
I'm going to oppose and say that I think we have a plan in front of us. It doesn't show open space. We want it, and we should deny it and then let them come back with a different one.
Well, we would have to require open space is what you're saying. We don't deny it. Kevin?
I say keep it open. I mean, it gives us time, 2 weeks, still within our legal limits to answer some of these questions. Potentially, the applicant should go to GOSA. I wouldn't call it a park. I'd always call it open space and see what the options are as far as this is concerned. And if we can limit the next meeting, Jeff, to only this part of the discussion, I'd appreciate it. Only.
Well, we'll have to hold the hearing open
I
to.
know.
Mr. Chairman, on the grounds that we want open space, what vehicle are we telling the applicant that this plan is no good?
No, we have to tell them that we will not accept it.
In what manner?
Hmm?
We haven't voted, we haven't.
No, we will hold the hearing open. If we want open space, if we we would deny his request for the waiver or the fee in lieu of.
Okay,
But I think we got to understand as a town, do we want it? 'Cause it has to be dedicated to the town, and does Parks and Rec want it? The open space.
Yep.
You're gonna have to pay the lawnmower to come out there once a week to mow it.
Mr. Chairman, if the commission wants us to put together or see if we can put together an open space plan, if that is the consensus, then we will do so. Similar to what we did after the last meeting when you asked us to put together a sidewalk plan and a combined driveway plan, neither of which we wanted to do, but we will endeavor to do that and report back to you
Could you do
at the
that?
next meeting if that's your desire. But I think Commissioner Fifedale made a very, very important point. We covered a lot of the same ground tonight that we did in the first hearing. If we could collectively agree that the hearing, any continuation of the hearing would be limited to this issue, and then you could close the hearing after we present, and the public gets their chance to comment on the open space plan. And if they have alternative plans, they can throw that out as well.
No, I think that makes sense to limit the discussion just to this one issue. So we'll hold it open for that. And Deb? Is Deb still there?
I am.
Oh, can you talk to Parks and Rec and see what their thoughts are?
We will.
Get their opinion. Should we have the town or think it's
Yeah.
a good idea for the
No,
town?
absolutely. And it would be very
Okay,
helpful if we could have a sketch of where the applicant thinks the open space might go.
We'll move as quickly as
Review.
possible to get that.
Great.
Just like when we did the driveway and the sidewalk, we got it in within a week so that DPW could review.
Great.
We'll do the same for Deb and Bruce so that they can get it to Parks and Rec.
Yeah. Because I think we have to understand the town's position on this.
Realize that we do not have an open space plan right now. And I may come back to you in 2 weeks and say, listen, this is what we did. Here's our work product. Nothing makes sense. I think my gut feeling, I agree with Commissioner Zod, but we're going to make a best case effort. We've shown good faith to this commission. We're going to continue to do so.
Thank you.
So we'll leave the public hearing open for this one item for additional information.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. So we'll move on then to our first business item is approval of the January 12th minutes. I'll make a motion for approving the minutes of our meeting of January 12th. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Does anyone have any corrections? Are there any corrections that anyone sees? I just had one item on page 4 at the top. It's section 8.1 on a comment that's made by staff. It says staff will follow up with the applicant on the concerns the commission had, including the measuring of the holding tank. I don't think we want to measure the tank. I think it's the contents in the tank.
Yep.
Just change it to say measuring either the level of the contents in the tank. I believe that's what the concern was, not the dimensions of the tank. Are there any other corrections? Hearing none, then we'll vote on the motion to approve the minutes of January 12th. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion is carried unanimously. And then I'd like to move over down to public communications. Does anyone on the public wish to address us tonight on our other businesses? I don't know if we have any other communications that we received, if staff has any, or any of the commissioners have any, other than the items that have already been passed out.
I'll just note for the public that you did receive for the Mystic Education Center, the developers agreement, the lease, and the Attorney General's purchase and sale.
Oh, yes. Those are public communication, I guess, yeah. Because they were submitted by Roseanne, or she the one that sent them in? Yeah. Yeah, she sent them to me a few days before that. All right. And then what I was hoping we would have time for discussion, but I think it's getting awful late, is a Mystic Education Center development.
There are a couple of folks who do want to address you under public communication.
Oh, we do. I thought we had none.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, okay. I misunderstood you. Yeah, so if we can listen to them.
Sure. There's a couple of them that are phone numbers, so I'm going to read the last 4 digits. 6409.
Good evening. This is Roseanne Katowski, 24 Ann Avenue, R10 District 5. I know this is a long meeting, so I will be brief. Regarding the proposed Mystic Oral School project, more and more people from Mystic every day are counting on the Planning and Zoning Commission to enforce the Town of Groton planning and zoning regs, which hopefully would eliminate this project or scale back this project, as well as prevent the proposed zone change that would allow for this project. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. The next one is also a phone number, 1147.
It's still showing muted.
It is. I'm asking to, there we go.
Hello,
Hello, go ahead.
my name is Jim Furlong. I believe you can hear me?
Yes, we can.
Jim, okay. I have a brief statement. My name is Jim Furlong. I live at 57 Fishtown Lane in Mystic. I'm speaking on my own behalf. The discussion about the proposed RESPER project, as Ms. Katowski has mentioned, is growing. They're growing in intensity. Neighbors and others have expressed many fears about Mystic River bluffs, noise, traffic, blasting damage, and so forth. But excessive scale is the theme that's most often cited. It underlies everything that's brought up. Many voice the opinion that it's just too big for a semi-rural campus surrounded by woods that once was a school for the deaf. Incidentally, our town turned down a bid for a prep school for Japanese and Korean students on this land, and one of its proponents said they would build a whole thing at their own expense. Residents also worry about how the company has expanded its residential unit count from an original maximum of 850 to 931 at present. To get a rough idea of how big this MRB might appear, I looked up the Ledges, a very large apartment complex that many of you know. It has 339 units and occupies 24 acres. It's hard to imagine a project on the banks of the Mississippi, on the banks of the Mystic River that has more than 2.5 times that unit number on what appears to be 64 acres, and it may now grow. All of that would sit atop the beautiful bluffs above the Mystic River. Still to come will be a discussion of a floating zone on the land, as well as Town of Groton financial aid to the project in the form of tax increment financing, a topic we're going to be hearing a lot more about in coming months. Both those concepts will have a major impact. The project's potential has been correctly described as seismic. The public needs a lot more information and input about this prime space that is proposed for transfer to the private sector. Thank you.
Thank you. Becca Welt.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I'm sorry to say that my plan to buy the oral school property and give it to the, sorry, Rebecca Welts, 32 Boulder Court.
Go ahead.
Okay. I'm sorry to say that my plan to buy the oral school property and give it to the Parks and Rec Department for playing fields and playgrounds and a splash pad came to an abrupt halt when my Mega Millions ticket did not win. I did try. I wanted to say thank you for creating the matrix and including our concerns. It obviously took a lot of time and I really appreciate all your work. I continue to believe that this project is grossly inappropriate for Mystic. I am baffled as to why the planning department thinks it has merit, and I beg that the commission carefully consider before you make any zoning changes and allow wetlands incursions that will allow this urban development in our town. Thank you for letting me share my concerns.
Thank you. Let's see, Faith Richardson.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. I'm on a new device and I wasn't sure it had a microphone. And hang on, my cat is standing on my notes. Sorry. So first of all, thank you guys. I know that this has been the longest meeting in the history of meetings, and I appreciate that you are. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I appreciate that you're still here listening to us. My name is Faith Richardson. I live at 21 Boulder Court. And I understand that developing the oral school property using the Restler plan comes with the possibility of eventually increasing revenue for the town. I'm all for developing the property and getting it back on the tax roll, but this is not the right plan. It is far too dense and ever-reaching in its scope. I think that along with looking at the money that may someday come in, we should also consider the costs. My children are the fourth generation of my family to live on Boulder Court. Mainly, this is because my grandparents figured out really early on, before the highway was built, that Boulder Court is a special place, which is why you hear so many of us fighting for it. This plan will cost my children the freedom that I experienced to play freely and safely in my neighborhood. The bigger cost comes at the identity of our small New England village of Mystic. Mystic will no longer be a small town. It will certainly lose its charm. I don't want to have to, but I can find another neighborhood to live in to regain the quality of life I want for my children. But once this development is built, Mystic's character will be forever changed. And I truly hope the cost is worth it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else, Deb, or?
Hold on. Robert Welt.
Good evening. And I'll keep this short too. According to the town's
Would you
website,
state your name and address, please?
sorry.
for the
Robert
record?
Welt, 18 Boulder Court. According to the town's website, planning department is quote, responsible for enhancing the character and quality of the town's neighborhoods. I would submit that the proposed development of the oral school does not meet this goal. In fact, it does just the opposite. If the Restler proposal is adopted, I'll no longer hear wildlife behind my house. I'll hear nightlife from the bar and restaurant, maybe from the 50-room boutique hotel. Please don't destroy my neighborhood simply to increase the grand list. Thank you.
Thank you. I do not see any other hands raised.
Okay, so we can move on to the same subject that the public has been talking to us on. And that got started on looking at the more details of this proposal of development on the bluffs. So I put it into this matrix form, and it sort of is interesting once you start doing that to see what's here. And then Roseanne had sent me a copy of the secret agreement between the town and the developer, which sort of shocked me. And it's like putting the cart before the horse, because right now, none of his project items could be accomplished. The area is only zoned for 80-acre lots as residential. So if we want to do that, we have to come up with what's the MEC supposed to do. And normally it seems like we always start looking at all the little details and never give it any thought of the big picture. Normally you start off and say, what do we want to develop? And start working down on how do you meet the objective. And that's what I thought we should start thinking about. Not making any decisions tonight, but just thinking about what should be done with the property first. Once that's done, then we can move into the more of the details. How do we want to control it? Then get into what does the MEC should say. And the POCD doesn't give us very much guidance on this because it was identified as governmental land, and it doesn't have any recommendations for it. However, when you look at some of the recommendations for property in section 2 for residential property, I think it gives you some rough ideas of what we should be thinking about. And that a recommendation for zoning development standards, which is what we're really going to end up with. It says align and adjust zoning development standards in older neighborhood areas to reinforce the established development pattern, complement existing structures, and enhance neighborhood character, which is probably a good big picture objective. And one of the first things I think we ought to look at is what's going to be allowable in this area, not to make a selection, because the MEC should really apply to any developer, whether it's Rustler or somebody else. We shouldn't, and that's what bothered me with the town selecting not just a developer, but this is the project. And the project to me is not realistic at all. That would, with an increase in population of all rental units, I think would take away what we see as the spirit level of the village of Mystic. You know, where you have there's a lot of activity and a lot of active people, a lot of active actions going on that I think would be lost by increasing the population by 40 to 50%, which is what this development would be. And if we look at the proposed MEC, there's a use table on pages 3 and 4. I think everybody should have a copy of that. And we should start looking at what's there and trying to say, is this realistic? Do we want to accept these things or maybe add things or take them away, and come up with a list, the list that we want, not what the consultant wants. or not necessarily maybe what the staff wants either, that it's our community. And I don't want to talk about them tonight, it's getting late, but I would think that maybe starting with the next meeting, we might want to start philosophizing over what we want. And if we want residential multi-unit units there, what sort of size do we want? You know, and there may be other things that might be worthwhile, like a nursing facility is on the list, but I think we've seen other applications where maybe living facilities for people that have some restrictions or something that need assisted living might be a good thing. You know, might be a good thought would be a small, maybe private school could fit in there. It's things that don't require a lot of traffic or a lot of support might be the types of things that would be there. And I was hoping maybe we could have a little discussion tonight, but I think it's too late for getting involved in any details. And then we can use this matrix that I did, we can add to it, or use this as a sort of a checklist to make sure that everything gets covered on things that are more detailed level. I don't know if staff has any input for us tonight. Or...
Good evening, everybody. This is John Reiner. One thing I just wanted to point out to the chairman, when you referenced the documents that were forwarded to you from Roseanne, none of those were any secret agreements. It wasn't a secret agreement between the town council and the developer. It was actually approved at a town council meeting.
Yes, but they were never made to us, and they did not meet any of the requirements. So there was a decision made to go hire a lawyer, an attorney to go write this agreement up where it could not be done. And I think that's backwards. And it should have had at least an input from the planning or planning and zoning commission as to this is realistic and practical. Because the thing is ridiculous. You don't want to increase a small rural area, which you can't get people to industry or commercial business to move in, which makes sense because we're between the two major hubs of business, New York and Boston. We're as far away as you can get, to go put in an area like this that increases a population in such a large fashion in a relatively rural area of the town. That's why it was, it really upset me to find this thing out. And it seemed like people had to go use FOI to get the information.
The development agreement was approved at a town council meeting and was discussed in open session. The lease agreement between Respler and the state, as well as the option agreement between Respler and the state, those were private documents for a period of time, and we needed to check to make sure we were not in violation of any state law in sharing those.
Yeah.
The development agreement has been an open agreement and a public agreement since it was in a draft form. That was the point I wanted to make.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, I don't think we should get involved in any financial dealings or actually who gets selected or not. It's just we should be writing the specifications for what's allowable in the MEC. And this agreement with Respler more or less said this is what we're going to go do. I don't know if anybody else on the staff has anything to add, or you have anything else. Does anyone, any of the commissioners have any comments to make on this and what their thoughts are?
Jeff, this is Kevin. I do.
Yes, Kevin.
My thoughts in reading it were very similar to yourself. And having been a very senior and executive manager in corporations, I felt as if a board of directors handed us down our business model without any input and said, do this, figure this out. And it doesn't seem that logical to me. I get that it has come through the town. I get that the councilors have voted on this as the agreement is concerned, but it's kind of like, I can't come up with your business model because I don't agree with your business model. And that's how I feel in this agreement after reading it. And very closely echo you. I wasn't upset about it because, there's a lot of injustices done. And frankly, I wasn't upset about it. I just think it was illogical. So those are my thoughts.
Hmm.
I think we could spend some more time another night when it's not almost 10:30, talking in a little bit more detail about the process that was done, the selection process to get to a preferred developer, and what that development agreement means. Because, even tonight in some of the public comments, I heard someone had said, "Oh, well, the town, denied a certain proposal for moving forward." The proposals were reviewed under a methodology of what was viable from even that a firm could actually build, or a developer could actually build on the site, and what they thought might work on the property. And, again, this is a state property, so the state was involved in that process too. The development agreement, in short, that the council approved, set a tone. It didn't say that it has to be a certain number of units, but they liked the project and the proposal that was brought forward. We expect that project to change as we go through any type of a process before the Planning and Zoning Commission. I think it would be worthwhile to take a little time and explain a little of that, so people can understand, where the cart and the horse were on this project.
No, yeah, we should be looking at it without worrying about that agreement. Really, we should just be looking at what do we see could be done with the property, and coming up with basically unique rules for this development. Not worrying about who the developer is. It should be more general than that, because Resper may back out of it because financially maybe he says, I can't do it, which is fine. We shouldn't be worried about the specific application or the specific developer.
And I think that's been our mindset as we have worked with Horsley Witten on this.
Right.
Acknowledging that the state has chosen a preferred developer, and yet knowing that maybe that development won't come to fruition. So whatever regulation is adopted really has to fit for your vision of the town.
Yeah.
And so I do think, this matrix is a really good start to sort of guide discussion, because we've been listening to been listening to presentations from Jeff Davis, our consultant, who's been working on the regs. And he's been trying to get input from you and as he modifies it. But I think looking at it, sort of concern by concern, and seeing where those concerns are addressed or not in the regulations, and getting your specific input will be really, really helpful.
Yeah.
So we tentatively have a special meeting scheduled for this Thursday. I know not all of you can attend. Do you still want to use that as a workshop to go through this matrix? I think we've got it at 6:30, scheduled at 6:30.
That's what I was thinking. We should probably cancel that meeting unless we want to just go through the matrix. I mean, we'd be missing some key people, which bothered me, at least to get started. Unless we want to just go through the matrix and understand what are the key points that require, more thought process or decision making. Some of these items, are always covered, like stormwater, drainage and those type of things are just a matter of saying, hey, they're covered elsewhere, or they would be in the MEC, but they're really not decisions we make. It's just making sure they get included as opposed to a decision. I don't know what others think. I mean, I can make the meeting, but I don't know if it's worth it. Unless we want to just go through the items and say, these are the ones that require, input from the various people, various commissioners.
I know there's probably other people, and I'm sure I'd like to hear what the other commissioners had to think in more general terms, like you started off with.
Well, that's what I was
But-
thinking, start off
yeah.
from that and then work down.
But since it's 20 after 10.
I don't want to do it tonight. No, I don't want to start into it
Right.
tonight at all.
Well,
I
mine
was
would last.
I was hoping that we'd only have an hour to spend on Star Street.
I know.
It's a supernova.
Good luck with that.
Huh? And,
Good luck with that.
And get into this on a philosophical standpoint, or get people really thinking. I didn't believe we should be making any decisions tonight on it, but just start thinking about it so we can talk about it.
Right.
And I like to work from the top down, or at least get to the point, what are the top issues? What can we do with it? What kind of density of development do we want? Those type of things are really important. And once you're there, the others probably fall in line.
Agree.
Yep.
Agree.
Makes
I think
sense.
we have the density, the type of development, and then we've had the excuse of trying to retain the two buildings that are of
Right.
interest. The school building
Yep.
and the Pratt building. And that, and one of the problems I see is the cost of
Yep.
either maintaining them or refurbishing them may force you into saying it's not realistic, or allow, just retaining a skeleton of the buildings.
Mm.
But those could come later, those decisions, I mean.
Yeah, it's a bulldoze option.
And the size of the buildings. I mean, this makes Smiley's Wharf thing look like a mini project.
Well, this
And
one comes with some assumptions.
Hmm?
This one came to us with some assumptions.
And we should ignore I'm just saying we should ignore them.
I think we have to.
We should start off with a clean slate. And you may end up partially back to where they were.
Right, but I think we should listen to John and let him provide some direction on how we got here. And then I agree with you, Jeff, after that point.
Yeah, I don't know if I really care about how we got here, but
I do.
I think I
Okay.
know how we got here.
Do.
I think I know how we got here.
But it has to do with, there was some math that happened. Some math
Exactly.
that we weren't privy to. So
Yep.
it couldn't hurt to hear it.
a lot of cigar smoke in the back room. All right.
Jeff, I take some offense to that.
What's that?
That there was a lot of cigar smoke in the back
I
room.
was kidding. I was kidding.
No, I think that's inappropriate. I really do.
Well, I mean, it was done really without getting the people that had to make the decisions involved.
This is a state-owned property.
I understand.
And the town has been talking about how to reuse this property for over 40 years.
Yes.
The town council was involved, and nothing has been approved other than the council saying that they wanted to work with the developer, a preferred developer, to try to get to a point to redevelop the property. A lot of the density on this property is driven by the reuse and the preservation of the Oral School building and the Pratt building. If those two buildings are not going to be reused, the density changes substantially on the property because those are both very big undertakings. And things were done in a very open way. And yeah, some of them were done in executive session with the council, but staff was present, and saying that there are smoke-filled rooms is very insulting to me professionally and to the other professionals I work with.
No, but we're the one, our commission is the one that makes the decision. and we're
Correct.
Not involved in it, which bothers me. I think that's wrong. Because, and I agree with you, when you look at it, that to save those buildings, and the Pratt building is in a very poor location, if we're going to open it to the public, that you have to build probably the ring road, which is very expensive, and maintaining those buildings and rehabbing that building, very expensive, may not be realistic. And I think we have to recognize that it may not be possible or even practical to maintain all that stuff. All right, I'd like to move on. I'd like to not have the meeting unless people want to, I don't know what the other commissioners feel like. If they want to have the meeting then, or is it easier to meet on a Tuesday?
I'm
get
open to
started?
either. I'm open to either.
I'm open to either.
Well, do you want to start on Thursday then?
Who are we missing on Thursday among the commissioners?
I thought Sue could.
Well, I paid for a class, and unfortunately it's on those odd Tuesdays, so I missed two, and that would be my third out of five, but I could miss three. It's not the end of the world.
It's odd Tuesdays or Thursdays?
Well, it's every Tuesday and Thursday for 5 in a row.
Tuesday. Oh, I see.
So I had it scheduled, so I'd only miss one, but now I'm gonna miss three. But that, like I say, they have recordings of the Zoom, so it's not the end of the world. I'm not getting a grade. So.
Well, it's just, yeah, I guess it's how much we start delving into it. If we just want to hold it to, do you have any specific times that you have the meeting? Is it all?
Well, it's 7 to 9. That's the thing. That's what makes it difficult. Because I mean, your schedule works for everybody, and I'm not trying to throw a wrench and all that. So.
No, but I think when we get into some of the discussions over what is practical from a use standpoint, it would be good to have that.
No, I'd hate to miss them, so that's why I would not go to the class. I'd be at the planning and zoning. So don't worry about me, just whatever works. It's okay.
I think we can chip away at it, and anything that comes up that we think is going to require a lot of discussion.
Yeah, we just, so why don't we, you want to meet Thursday then?
I'm good with Thursday.
All right, let's.
Not going to be one meeting.
No, I know that. It's not a lot, but.
That will be done.
It's just 2 weeks, Steve. It flattens the curve. Don't worry about it.
Well, I think once you get some of the basics done, then it will be easy to fall in on it. It's just the basic determinations.
That's good. Jeff Davis is available to listen in and listen to your discussion and participate if you need him. So that's good. I'm glad we'll hold it on Thursday.
And then start thinking about what are the uses, or unless we want to go over what are the potentials of restrictions that we have on the land or the costs.
Yeah, I mean, let's start with uses, I think, and then work off your matrix from there. Yeah.
We can figure out what we want to figure out on Tuesday.
There you go.
Tuesday.
So we'll do a Thursday. Start on Thursday then.
Okay, that's good.
Sounds great.
6:30.
Yeah, I believe so. Yep, 6:30.
6:30, and maybe keep it down to no more than 2 hours or less. No, I'm serious.
Sure.
I
Yeah.
think this.
Right.
That would be great.
That'd
No,
be good.
you
Right.
want to keep a fresh mind.
Yeah, that's right. First,
And this will just be a workshop for this
It's a
commission.
workshop. No public input.
Right,
It's just a workshop,
right.
just purely workshop. That's good. Because then maybe it will go fast after that. You don't think so?
We'll see.
Well, a lot of the work has been done by Jeff Davis, I think, but the real details are time consuming for a lot of the text.
Oh, absolutely.
Hmm?
Yeah, for sure.
That's not of concern. All right, new business. We have new applications. Factory Square. two
Right, those
items,
are,
micro apartments.
yeah, this is a special permit and a site plan for the same project. We'll schedule a special meeting, sorry, a public hearing for it after we hold a staff review.
Okay. So they just want one unit or a lot of them?
One unit, it's change of one retail spot to one unit.
Oh, is that what but
It
you
is.
call it a micro apartment? That's
Well, it's a, yeah, a tiny, a very small apartment.
smaller than what they're all ones they have.
Yeah, oh yeah, it's like 300 to 500 square feet. It's small.
Yeah. Well, I'm
Yeah.
just curious what they were doing. Report of chair. I don't think I have anything else to report on. Report of commission. Does anyone in the commission have anything to identify? A report of staff.
Just a couple of things. Deb Philott sent you a notice of some training by the Connecticut Bar Association. If you want to participate, she needs to know by Friday. And I believe you all were copied on a memo from the town manager to the Parks and Rec Commission, Conservation Commission, and the Economic Development Commission about two excess properties, one on Flanders Road and one on Pequannock. I just wanted to make sure that you'd seen that and that you're aware of it. At some point, you'll get an 824.
I don't remember seeing that.
Haven't
No, I
seen
didn't
it.
see it.
Okay, then. We will get it to you. It definitely said copy to you guys. One is a 16-acre parcel on Flanders Road, just south of I-95 that the town is considering disposing of. It's been in town ownership for quite a long time. I think it was originally part of the landfill. The other one is on Pequannock Road. It's the former Nutmeg Farms convenience store and gas station that was taken down a number of years ago next to the Connecticut Center for Massage Therapy, that former school.
Right.
Where the old gas station used to be.
Exactly, exactly. All right, so I'll make sure that you get that. Okay.
On this training, is that reasonable to attend? It's an all-day session, right?
It is, and it's on a Saturday. Bruce, I think, didn't you go to that a year or two ago and said it was quite useful?
Yeah, I went a couple of years ago. It was at Wesleyan University in person. It was good. It was an all-day session. They have different speakers every year, I believe. So I think it could be useful. I don't think it's too expensive being virtual either, because they don't give you lunch. So I think the price is a little cheaper.
Yeah, I think all you're paying for is the publications they have. It said $40, I think.
And if you want, I mean, the town has budgeted training for commissioners, so
No,
you
I
just
just
need to let
wondered.
us know by Friday.
I just wondered whether it's worth it or not. It's 8 hours. That's what I'm saying. Well, it might be better if it's live than, watching a little screen.
Mhm.
All right. Anything else? We got next meeting will be February 6:30, and our regular meeting will be on the following. Oh yes, on that following meeting, I think I can make that. I'll be in Colorado then, but I'll have my computer. And since
They have internet there too.
and I assume it's in a big hotel. And I just found out a day or so ago that we were supposed to be 2 people in a room. And Colorado says, unless you're living together, it's a no-no. And the
Not happening.
hotel, what the hotel did, which has surprised me, was they had these queen suites with a special living area and a kitchen, and they either moved people to the 2 people into one of those, or they were put people into single rooms. So I got a single room. So I can probably make the meeting if we need to.
Good.
It may be boring if you can't do anything, if everything's closed down. But I was surprised the hotel did that. They're probably hurting for visitors. So if no one has anything else, then I'll make a motion for adjournment.
Second.
Moved and seconded. So it's 10:36.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Good night, all.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.